Good evening, and in the hidden history of Romulus and Remus, you find yourself on the grassy hillsides of Latium near Alba Longa in the 8th century BC, with wood smoke and wild thyme on the morning air, sheep bells clanking somewhere above you, the Tiber shining silver below, and the quietly astonishing fact that two lost princes can spend years becoming excellent shepherds before anyone notices the royal paperwork. A warm welcome back to Lydia in Nairobi and Marcus in Dorset, who both commented on the last video and stayed until the end, and I am glad you are here again. Tell me where you are and what time it is for you, just like Lydia and Marcus did, and if you feel like it, please like and subscribe so you can fall asleep easily with a new story every time. Have you ever felt people looking to you first, even when you are only trying to get through an ordinary morning? Then the hill takes you in. The grass under your blanket is cold and damp, and the air tastes of smoke, thyme, sheep wool, and thin river mist from the valley. A boy is already crouched by the coals and blowing them bright, while another calls sheep numbers into the gray light and waits without thinking for your answer. You open your eyes to a sky that has not yet chosen its color. It hangs above the Alban hills in pale layers. One part is blue, one part is pearl, one part is still thinking about night. Your cloak has slipped from one shoulder. The rough wool scratches your neck. Dew has crept into the hem and made it heavier in the dark. You pull it back around you and sit up slowly. Around you, the camp is half awake. A few shapes are still wrapped in blankets. A few are already standing. One dog raises its head, decides you are not interesting, and puts its nose back under its tail. That is fair enough. The fire lies low in a ring of stones. The outer ash looks dead. The center still holds a small red eye. You lean forward and take the stick from the boy, who has been puffing at it like a man trying to wake a very stubborn god. You stir the coals. Sparks jump up. Dry twigs go in first, then a split branch, then one more piece laid across with care, because fire likes manners more than force. The boy watches your hands and says nothing. He is old enough to carry water and young enough to believe that every task has one right way. You do not tell him that most work is only done well by habit. You only nod when the flames catch, and he nods back as if this settles something important. It often does. The first clear sound of the morning comes from the sheep pen above the camp. A ewe complains in a tired voice. A lamb answers as if the whole hillside belongs to it. Beyond them comes the thin metal clank of bells, slow and irregular, drifting over the grass. You know each bell by sound, before you see the neck that carries it. That one belongs to a broad brown ewe with a torn ear. That duller one belongs to a ram who likes to lean on fences until they become opinions rather than structures. That bright little tap belongs to the smallest wether in the flock, who walks with great self-importance and no useful purpose at all. He's not alone in that, though you are too sleepy to name names. You rub your hands over your face and feel grit from yesterday still in your skin. Your palms are rough. Your knuckles are marked with old scrapes. Your nails are clean enough for a shepherd, which means no one would admire them, and you consider that a proper success. You reach for your tunic where it lies folded near your blanket. It is not folded well. It is folded the way a tired man folds cloth, when the dark has already won. You shake it once, pull it over your head, and work your arms through the sleeves while the morning air searches every gap. The cloth smells of lanolin, smoke, and sun from yesterday. You tie your belt by touch. You tuck your small knife into it. You slide your feet into sandals that have shaped themselves to you so completely, they seem less like footwear and more like a treaty. A cloak, a belt, a knife, a staff. That is enough to begin a day. You stand, and 3 men nearby also stand. You do not ask them to. They simply rise when you do, the way birds shift when the branch beneath them moves. One heads for the water skins, one heads for the pen gate. The third waits for your eye and points toward the upper slope where the mist is thicker. You look once and decide where the flock should graze first. That is all. No speech follows. No one praises your wisdom. They just move because you have pointed, and because your pointing tends to lead to grass, water, and fewer foolish surprises before noon. You have never thought much about why. As far as you know, this is simply how mornings happen. Someone has to choose. You are often nearest. You are often right. Those two facts have made a shape around you. and everyone seems comfortable standing inside it. You are comfortable too. Below the camp, the valley opens in long gray folds. Far off, the Tiber catches the first clean light and becomes a narrow blade of silver. It flashes between trees, then hides, then shows itself again. The river looks quiet from here. It often looks quiet from here. Rivers have that skill. They can shine like polished metal and still remember Basket's secrets and the kind of small decisions that trouble old kings for 20 years. You know none of that when you stretch your back and breathe in. You only know the smell of wet earth. You know the sweet sting of crushed thyme beneath a sandal. You know the smoke from oak wood and the wool smell of sheep warming after a cold night and the faint sour note from an unwashed leather bucket that should have been cleaned yesterday. You think about the bucket before you think about destiny. That says good things about you. You take the bucket now and head toward the spring with 2 others. The path is familiar even in half-light. It curves around a patch of stone, dips between low bushes, and comes out by a shallow run of water that talks to itself over pebbles. The grass here wets your ankles and darkens the leather thongs on your sandals. One of the men beside you starts telling the story he has already told twice. It concerns a fox, 3 hens, and his own courage. The fox grows larger each time. The hens grow more foolish. His courage grows until it nearly requires a shrine. You let him talk, because the day is young and boasting is lighter than carrying silence uphill. At the spring you kneel and dip the bucket slowly. The water is so cold it aches in your fingers. It catches bits of pale sky and broken leaf in the shape of your hand. You lift it carefully, brace it against your thigh, and pass it back. No one says thank you. That is another good sign. When work is shared well, thanks become part of the work itself. The bucket goes from hand to hand, water skins are filled, a small clay cup appears from somewhere and circles once. Everyone drinks with the same face people wear when the water is colder than expected and better than promised. Back at camp, the sheep are waking properly now. They push at one another in the pen. They stamp in the trampled dirt. Steam rises from their backs where dawn touches the wool. A lamb sticks its head through the rails, changes its mind, and makes the same mistake again. You set down the water and undo the gate latch. The flock presses forward, but not wildly. They know your voice. They know the dogs. They know the narrow order in which 100 bodies can become a moving line without turning into an insult to all patience. You click your tongue once and lift your staff. The first animals come through in a thick, soft rush. Wool brushes your legs. Hooves knock stone. Bells knock bone. A dog circles the edge with serious devotion and occasional confusion, which is about the right mixture for a good sheepdog. You count as they pass, not with grand numbers, not with the air of a man working out the stars. You count the way shepherds count, with little marks in the mind and small checks of the eye. White-faced ewe, broken-horn ram, pair of late lambs, thin one, limping one, mean one who belongs to someone else and has joined your flock for reasons known only to itself. You catch that last one by the neck wool and turn it neatly aside. Its owner will come looking later. He always does. He always begins by saying his sheep never wanders. This remains one of the less convincing traditions of Latium. A hand reaches over your shoulder and tosses you a strip of yesterday's bread. You catch it without looking. You bite it while still counting. It is hard at the edge and soft in the middle. It tastes of ash from the fire and fennel seed from Acca Laurentia's loaf, because she puts fennel in almost everything and has never once looked sorry. If a kingdom ever falls into her hands, it will smell like bread. You think of her now with the same warmth you feel from the fire. She will already be awake at the hut. She will be busy over a pot. She will be convinced that the cure for cold, hunger, bad luck, wounded pride, and any possible news from Alba Longa is more stew. She would pack provisions for an argument if she thought the argument might run long. She has probably packed something already. She does not entirely trust a morning that begins without food wrapped in cloth. By the time the last sheep leaves the pen, the camp is fully up. Blankets are rolled, packs are tied, slings are checked. Someone shakes out a cloak and fills the air with dust and indignation. Someone else laughs at nothing in particular, which is sometimes the best kind of laugh. You stand by the gate and look over the men. Some are older than you by a few years, some are younger, some have beards that make them seem wiser than they are. Some have faces so open that every thought walks across them without sandals. Nearly all of them glance at you before setting off. One wants the lower path by the alder trees, another prefers the stony rise near the fig grove. A third asks with one lifted hand whether he should mend the broken hurdle first or help drive the smaller flock east. You answer each question in a word or two. That seems to be enough for everyone. You have never named yourself their leader. No one else has named you either. It has gathered around you in quiet layers, like smoke finding the same beam in a roof every morning. When strangers come, they speak to you first. When boys quarrel, they call for you. When dogs bolt, they look for your whistle. You assume this means you are useful. That is true as far as it goes. A shout comes from farther up the slope, followed by laughter that is trying very hard to sound innocent. You do not need to turn your head to know who has reached trouble before breakfast. Remus has that gift. If a morning holds one loose stone, one offended ram, and one questionable idea, he generally finds all three before the sun clears the hill. You look anyway. He is standing on a low wall with his arms spread, as if the wall is a ship, the hill is a sea, and caution is a rumor invented by old people. Two boys below him are arguing over a sling. One claims the leather is his. The other claims the cord is his. Remus appears to have solved this by taking both. He jumps down before you reach him. He lands lightly. He grins with the smug calm of a man who has just made matters much louder and believes that counts as fixing them. He is your twin in the face and your opposite in patience. The same dark hair falls over his brow. The same quick eyes size up the slope. The same strong hands know staff, knot, and stone. But he leads with his chin. You lead with the pause before the answer. He does not always believe in that pause. He considers it decorative. The two boys start speaking at once. Remus raises one hand and they stop, mostly because they are surprised. He dangles the sling from two fingers like a judge presenting evidence, though his idea of law usually begins where everyone else's ends. Then he points to one boy's pouch of stones and the other's belt hook. He puts the sling into the hand that can actually use it. The matter settles at once, which annoys you slightly because it means his method has worked again. You give him a look. He gives you the same look back, only brighter, as if to say he had the whole thing under control from the start, and also that this should now be admired. You do not admire it aloud. That would only encourage him, and the hills do not need more encouragement. He falls into step beside you anyway. Up close, the likeness between you is stronger. People notice it every time. Older women look from your face to his and back again, then make signs against bad luck or good luck, or perhaps simply confusion. Children stare openly. Traders ask if they should pay one of you or both. Men who do not know you both well tend to put their trust in the wrong twin for exactly 3 breaths. After that, they learn. You and Remus walk the edge of the flock together. He carries his staff across his shoulders and hooks his wrists over it, which would make an old priest sigh and a young dog worship him. He has a scrape on one knuckle that was not there last night. You do not ask about it because the answer would likely be long, proud, and only partly true. Instead, you ask where he found the sling. He says it found him. This is not useful. He says the boys were ready to bite each other over it. This is more believable. He says the one with the narrow shoulders throws like an old ant, and the one with the missing tooth lies like a trader measuring cloth. This may also be true. Then he asks where you want his group this morning. That question arrives as casually as a pebble dropped into water. Yet there it is. He may brawl first and think later, but when the flock spreads and the paths divide, he still asks you where to take his men. He does it without shame and without ceremony. You point toward the upper grass where the dew stays longest. You tell him to keep the lambs off the steep side where the stones shift underfoot. You tell him to watch the brindled ram who has been shouldering smaller animals for sport. You tell him to be back by midday if the sky thickens over the western ridge. He listens the whole time. Then he nods once, which is his closest version of obedience, and therefore one of the more impressive sights in Latium. He whistles to his own little knot of herdsmen, and they move around him easily, laughing, adjusting belts, taking their places. If you lead like a gate swinging open, he leads like a dog taking a corner too fast. Both methods reach the field. One method leaves fewer bruises. The flock begins to spread over the hillside in long white bands. From above, it must look like cloud fallen onto grass. From where you stand, it looks like work. Sheep lower their heads and tear the wet green with serious devotion. Dogs weave through legs and shadows. Men with staffs pace slow lines and call soft sounds that have more meaning to animals than speeches have to many people. The sun begins to touch the top of the mist. Gold appears first on the far ridges. Then it slips down the slope in strips. Thorn bushes sharpen. Rocks warm from gray to brown. The Tiber below loses its hard silver edge and becomes a softer light, wide and calm and distant. You squint toward Alba Longa without thinking. The city lies off beyond the folds of land, not always visible from here and never quite part of your day until market time, tax time, or rumor time. To you it is a place of walls, smoke, carts, and people who own cleaner sandals than sense. It is where grain changes hands and old men argue in doorways. It is not, in your mind, yours. You have no hidden ache for a throne. You have no dream of halls and crowns. You do not lie awake wondering why command sits so naturally on your shoulders, or why your temper rises at unfairness as if it has old work to do. You think you are a shepherd who happens to be good at being followed. That seems explanation enough. Far away, of course, your great-uncle Amulius has spent 20 years trying to delete the backup files of the royal succession. Nature, being less impressed by tyrants than tyrants prefer, has saved 2 excellent copies in dust, wool, and shepherd's knots. Yet none of that troubles your breakfast. At this moment, your deepest concern is whether the youngest lamb will once again try to climb into the grain basket. It will. You know this because character reveals itself early. A small group of boys comes up from the lower track carrying extra ropes and one badly patched skin bag. They greet you first. They do not do it because you are older. You are not much older than some of them. They do it because you remember who forgets to tie knots, who cuts corners on watch, and who can be trusted with a skittish ewe in a long afternoon. You send one to the spring again. You send another to check the fence by the fig grove. You keep the third near the lambs because he has gentle hands and a voice that calms animals. You make these choices in moments as if the answers are waiting close under your skin. Perhaps they are. A boy asks if he should take the brindled dog with him. You glance once at the dog. The dog looks back with the hopeful expression of a creature who would very much like to assist with anything at all, especially if it involves running in the wrong direction. You tell the boy to take the older black dog instead. The brindled dog is offended for exactly half a breath. Then it becomes distracted by a grasshopper and forgets its sorrow. When the first good warmth reaches the camp, someone sets a small pot near the fire for morning porridge. The smell drifts over slowly. A little goat milk goes in, so does a pinch of salt, because even poor porridge deserves dignity. Someone adds a torn herb leaf with a hopeful air, and you suspect this is less cooking than optimism. Still, warm food is warm food. You kneel with a wooden bowl when your turn comes. The porridge is plain and lumpy. It is also perfect. Steam rises into your face. You blow once and taste grain, smoke, and the faint sweetness of milk. A piece of cheese follows, sharp and crumbly, and your whole body forgives the dawn for being cold. Remus appears again precisely as you lift the second bite. He has already finished his own portion somewhere else, which seems unfair, but deeply in character. He takes a piece of cheese from your hand with the smooth confidence of a man borrowing from himself. Then he leans against a post with that familiar expression which says he has mastered the morning and perhaps invented it. You ask what went wrong up there. He says, nothing went wrong. A lamb escaped. One boy slipped. A dog barked at a bush with unusual conviction. A ram objected to existence. He solved everything. He says this while wiping porridge from his chin, which softens the grandeur of the report. Whatever goes wrong today, Remus gets there first. Faustulus arrives before you finish the bowl. He comes up the path exactly as he always does when a quiet moment begins to settle. He carries a wedge of goat cheese in one hand and a troubled look in the other, which is a remarkable trick, and one he performs often. His beard is rough with gray. His shoulders are broad, but tired. His silence reaches the camp before his feet do. You make space for him by the fire. He lowers himself onto a stone and looks at the flock before he looks at you. That is also his way. He seems to take in every sheep, every man, every dog, and each strip of morning light on the grass, as if he must place the world in order before speaking into it. Then he offers you the cheese. You take it and thank him. He grunts once. This may mean you are welcome. It may mean the weather will change. With Faustulus, many meanings share a coat. He studies your face a moment longer than usual. You notice because his silences are longer and heavier than any man's silences have a right to be. They have weight. They sit down beside you. They ask for room at the fire. They sometimes make even Remus look at his own hands. Today the silence seems especially full. But when he finally speaks, he asks only whether the eastern fence still leans. You tell him it does. He nods like a man hearing bad news he has expected for years. Then he asks whether the lamb with the twisted foot has kept up this morning. You tell him it has. That nod is softer. You think his worry belongs to fences, lambs, weather, and the same plain set of cares that belong to every shepherd with more responsibility than sleep. You do not yet know that he has been carrying a secret for 20 years, and that the weight of it has settled in his shoulders like wet wool. You only see an old man who looks tired before noon. He breaks the cheese with his thumbs and shares it around. No speech follows, none is needed. Men eat, dogs wait with painful dignity. Ash shifts in the fire ring. One of the younger boys burns his fingers on the pot handle, tries to look brave, and fails in a charmingly complete way. Faustulus hands him bread without comment. That is almost tenderness, at least in the language he speaks best. After a while, Faustulus rises and walks with you toward the lower side of the flock. He carries his crook low. He steps carefully through thyme and stone. The sun shows every line in his face now, and each line looks earned. Beside him you feel young in the practical way of young men, which means you feel sturdy, busy, and essentially unbreakable. You ask if he slipped. He says enough. You ask if Acca Laurentia sent more bread. He says of course she did, as if the question insults the order of the cosmos itself. Then after another long stretch of nothing, he says she has also sent a small pot of stew, left from last night, for the morning. You laugh because of course she has. Only Acca Laurentia would look at the first light of day and think, what this moment lacks is cabbage, lentils, onions, and one more ladle. If you told her you were going to market, she would pack bread. If you told her you were going to a wedding, she would pack bread. If you told her you were going to overthrow a tyrant, she would wrap extra bread in cloth and ask whether you had eaten enough first. The thought makes you smile without knowing why it matters. The world to you is still held together by ordinary things. A good fence matters, a sharp knife matters, dry wood matters, knowing which ewe will wander and which boy will forget his water skin matters. The blood in your body seems no more interesting than the blood in anyone else's body. Birth is old news, breakfast is current. This is a pleasant way to live. You move through the flock as the morning widens. Now and then someone calls your name. A dog needs redirecting. A kid has put its head where its head should not be. Two men disagree about whether the upper patch is grazed too short. You settle each thing in turn, sometimes with words, sometimes with a hand on a gate, sometimes with a look that tells foolishness it has had a fair chance and should now leave. No one resents you for it. That part is easy to miss because it happens so naturally. You correct without swagger, you choose without fuss, you do not make men feel small while telling them where to stand. They leave your side knowing what to do and somehow not minding that you were the one who decided it. This may be rarer than you think. A little later, one of the younger herdsmen jogs up from the lower track. He is breathing hard from speed rather than danger, which is always pleasant to see. He says a group from another pasture wants to trade salt for 2 skins of curdled milk. He asks if he should tell them to wait. You tell him yes. You tell him to offer 1 skin first, not 2. You tell him to look at the salt before agreeing because last time the lumps were half grit and all disappointment. He grins and runs off, pleased to have instructions, and perhaps even more pleased to repeat them as if they are partly his. You watch him go. There are men born to ask for orders. There are men born to resist them. There are a few, very few, who can give them in a way that feels like relief. You do not know this as a theory, you only live inside it as a fact. The hillside knows it too, even the sheep seem calmer when you pace their edge. That may be vanity, it may also be true. Animals sense steadiness, so do people. You carry your body like a man who expects ground to hold firm under him. Others step more easily when they see that. If anyone asked where you learned this, you would shrug. You would say you learned it here. You learned it from wind on open slopes and from watching storms gather over distant woods. You learned it from Faustulus measuring pasture with his eyes. You learned it from Acca Laurentia managing a full hut with one pot and no nonsense. You learned it from Remus by learning very early what happens when no one slows down before speaking. You learned it because someone had to. By now the sun stands clear above the ridge. The mist has almost burned away. Grass shines where dew still clings in the shade. Insects begin their thin, bright music. The smell of the hillside changes from cold water and ash to warm herb and sheep wool drying in light. You breathe it in like a man receiving news he already trusts. Somewhere down in Alba Longa, old men sit on benches and think themselves important. Somewhere behind stone walls, your grandfather Numitor keeps every inch of his regal bearing on a stone floor that has no right to look so much like a throne room. Somewhere your great-uncle tries to hold together the tidy lie he built 20 years ago. Somewhere the truth inches closer in shepherd's sandals. Here, though, you are busy checking a fence post with your foot. The post holds. That feels satisfying enough for one morning. You press it once more. Then you straighten, rest your hands on your staff, and look over the broad living patchwork of men, dogs, bells, and wool that has somehow become your world. It is a good world. It is small enough to understand. It asks for strength, memory, fairness, and a certain tolerance for mud. It does not ask whether you were born for more. It does not whisper about kings. It does not mention river baskets or stolen crowns. It only asks where the flock should go next. And because everyone is waiting for your answer already, you lift your staff toward the higher grass and begin walking, with the whole easy order of the hillside turning after you, as if it has always known your name. You stand beside the boundary stones while the grass still holds the cold of the night. The stones are not much to look at. They are two lumpy rocks with white chalk rubbed over them in old streaks. A thorn bush grows between them with the calm of something that refuses all legal debate. Below you the valley opens in pale morning light. The Tiber gives a silver wink far away. The air smells of wood smoke, damp earth, and wild thyme crushed under your heel. Your sheep crop the slope with the slow faith of creatures who believe every hill belongs to them. They wear little bells at their necks. The bells clank from different places at once. It sounds like a lazy argument taking place in the grass. This patch of pasture always starts the day before you do. The best grass grows here after the spring rain. It is thick near the oaks. It stays greener longer than the higher ground, where the sun burns everything into a pale crust. Everyone knows where the good feed lies. Nobody agrees who gets to stand over it while pretending this is an ancient point of law. You know this quarrel well. It has the worn shape of an old sandal. Every season somebody says the line runs a little farther left. Every season somebody else remembers a grandfather, a witness, and a stone that has mysteriously walked downhill. The stones do move, which is part of the trouble. A winter flood nudges one. A bored shepherd kicks another. A goat scratches its side and shifts a pebble with all the moral concern of a goat, which is none at all. Remus arrives late, which means he arrives exactly when the noise begins. He comes down the slope with his staff over one shoulder. His tunic hem is still damp from crossing the stream by the reeds. He grins at the boundary stones as if they have personally offended him. You see, his face seems to say, "I was right to come." Remus always reaches trouble first. If a cartwheel breaks in Latium, he has likely leaned on it already. If a jar falls from a shelf, he has probably glanced at it with interest one breath earlier. He plants his staff in the grass and squints at the far side. A line of men comes over the rise above the oaks. They bring cattle with broad horns and rough hides. Their cloaks are dark with dew at the hem, and their dogs range ahead with their noses low. You know these men by sight. They herd for the old household tied to Numitor. They have crossed words with you since you were old enough to carry a sling and think yourself wise. That was some years ago, and you are only slightly wiser now. One of them lifts a hand toward the stones. He does not greet you. He points with 2 fingers, as though he is measuring cloth at market, and finds your claim embarrassingly generous. You answer by leaning on your staff and looking at the thorn bush. The bush has red hips on one side and bare twigs on the other. It is not a noble witness. It does not care who invokes its authority. Still, men have argued over less convincing plans for whole mornings. The first words are almost polite. A man on their side says the cattle will pass through, as they always do. You say they always do so too low on the slope. He says you remember badly. You say the grass remembers better. That line pleases Remus very much. He laughs before anyone should. He laughs with his chin first. He has a way of standing as if his feet arrived merely to support the next unhelpful opinion. The other men hear him and bristle in the usual way. This is never one quarrel. It is 10 small ones bundled together and dragged up the hill. Someone mentions last month's trampled bean patch. Someone else recalls a missing ewe. A boy mutters about a water skin cut with a knife, though it was more likely chewed by a dog. The old score grows legs and starts walking around among you. You remember one summer when a boundary stone was found with fresh mud under it. You remember another when their boys drove pigs through your camp at dusk, and one pig ran off with a strip of drying linen like a champion thief. They remember everything too. This is the trouble with country memory. It is sharp when a patch of grass is involved, and soft when rent is due. You shift your weight and study the herd behind them. At first you notice only the cattle nearest the men. They swish their tails against flies. They breathe steam into the cool air. Their horns catch the light under the oak leaves. Then you notice how many more shapes move lower down the slope. 2 boys on their side drift wide, almost carelessly. Another man lags behind with 3 spare ropes looped over his shoulder. A dog circles your cattle with too much purpose for an idle morning. The quarrel has been prepared before it reaches your ears. This is not only about where the line lies. The argument is a curtain. Behind it, hands are already at work turning heads, opening gaps, and making your best cattle think somebody else's path looks inviting. It is a neat little plan, in a muddy sort of way. Numitor's men know you expect a shouting match at the stones, so they bring one. Meanwhile, other hands edge through the herd and sort the richer animals from the slower stock, with the patient skill of men choosing figs at market. You do not yet know why they dare so much this morning. Perhaps they think your band is thin. Perhaps they trust the old king's name in private and deny it in public. Perhaps they simply wake with that ancient human belief that somebody else's cattle look fatter because destiny owes them a favor. Destiny, you notice, rarely helps untie knots or mend fences. A brindled cow of yours turns away from the hill. A second follows. A third pauses, then moves after them with the vague confidence of a creature who has misunderstood everything. You feel the shape of the trick before you can name it aloud. Watch the lower herd, you say. The words come out fast and firm. They do not feel borrowed from any older man. They feel like something already waiting in your chest, as if command has been standing there all along with folded arms. Your own herdsmen look toward you without argument. One boy grips his sling and runs for the lower path. Another turns the dogs with a whistle. An older man with a scarred wrist moves uphill at once to block the gap near the oaks. You point with your staff, and the line of your arm settles them. There is no speech. There is no grand pose. You simply see where each pair of feet should go. And they go there, as if you have rehearsed this in dreams beside the fire. Remus notices and smiles sideways at you. It is not a gentle smile. It says he expects you to be right and himself to do something faster. It also says he has already picked the most troublesome direction on the hill and feels called to it. The man opposite you keeps talking about stones. He tells you his father grazed here under Numitor's rule. He tells you the old line runs by the flat rock below the oak. He tells you this with great feeling and with one eye still on the moving cattle. You look where his eye keeps slipping. The flat rock sits half hidden in time. It does look useful. So do lies when they are dusted with old names and spoken slowly. A great many false claims in history begin as somebody touching a rock and sounding tired. Behind you, bells strike faster as the herd shifts. Now the sound is wrong. It is no longer the scattered clink of animals feeding. It is a broken wave of metal, urgent and uneven, mixed with snorts and the slap of hooves through wet grass. You step past the stones. The first shove comes almost as a courtesy. A shoulder brushes yours too hard. Your hand goes out to steady one of your men. Another hand grabs a staff. The staff's knocked together with a dry wooden crack. Then the whole hillside remembers it is full of men. Voices rise among the oaks. Dogs bark. A calf lets out a long, complaining cry, as if this meeting has been badly organized and someone should refund the hay. Dust begins to lift from the trampled patches. You smell crushed thyme under sandals. You smell old wool cloaks warming in the sun. You smell cattle leather and that sharp sour note from a skin of goat milk that should have been finished at dawn. Remus is already moving. Of course he is. If caution sets a table, Remus has left before the bread arrives. He darts toward the lower herd with 3 men after him and enough confidence for 7. You catch his sleeve for 1 heartbeat. He twists free with that same smug look. It is the expression of a man who has just ignored good advice and already plans to tell the story as proof of his sound judgment. Left side, you call after him. He lifts 2 fingers without turning. This is his way of saying he heard you, agrees entirely, and will now do something slightly worse. The men around the stones stop pretending this is a discussion. A big herdsman with a red cord at his wrist lunges for your staff. You pull it back and jab the butt into the ground between you. Another man pushes one of your boys. The boy falls on 1 knee, then comes up angry and grass-stained. You step into the space before the push can spread. There is no time to think about being obeyed. You simply take the center. You call names. You send 1 man right, another higher, 2 more toward the cattle bunching below the oak roots. Your voice cuts through the noise better than you expect. Men turn toward it as if it has always belonged there. Even the dogs seem to pause and listen, though they may only be deciding whose lunch is easiest to steal. The slope grows crowded in a clumsy, breathing way. Cattle press shoulder to shoulder. Men slip between them. Sandals slide on bare earth where the grass has worn thin from months of passing hooves. An acorn cracks under your heel. That tiny sound stays oddly clear inside the larger noise. It reminds you how close the oaks stand. Their roots rise like low ribs from the ground. Their leaves shake overhead with a dry, papery hiss. One of your men wrests a rope from a stranger's hand. The rope is new. That tells you enough. Nobody brings fresh-cut rope to a boundary dispute unless he expects ownership to become imaginative before noon. This is a cattle raid wearing the mask of a legal complaint. You almost admire the effort. It has planning. It has timing. It has that foolish belief that if several men speak loudly enough about custom, nobody will notice them stealing the custom itself. Somewhere beyond the slope, Amulius would appreciate the style. He has spent 20 years trying to delete the backup files of the royal line. Nature, as usual, has very poor respect for paperwork and saves automatically to the cloud. You do not know this yet, but the hill seems to. A lean gray cow pushes between 2 men and nearly knocks them over. Both sides grab for her rope. She stares ahead with the solemn patience of a creature who has never once cared for politics. Her breath puffs in white bursts. Her ear flicks at flies as if this whole quarrel is slightly beneath her. You catch the rope and swing her back uphill. Hold the horned ones, you call. Let the sheep stay wide. Your men answer at once. One whistles. Another waves his cloak to turn the smaller flock from the crush. The sheep drift away in a woolly cloud of offended innocence. They want no part in noble struggles over pasture law. This is wise of them. A man from Numitor's side lunges again, but now the hill has lost all neat lines. Your herdsmen and theirs knot together under the trees. Arms push, staffs block. Hands grab sleeves and belts, and the backs of tunics slick with sweat. Nobody looks grand among oak roots. You shove a shoulder back. You catch a falling boy by the elbow. You bark for space around the calves. One moment you are by the boundary stones. The next you are halfway downslope with 3 bodies between you and the place where the argument began. Chaos spreads in practical ways. A water skin splits under a boot and darkens the dust. Someone's lunch bundle bursts open. Olives roll across the ground with a quiet dignity that the men do not deserve. You nearly tread on a round loaf. It lies in the grass beside a dropped sling. The loaf is still warm at the center. Acca Laurentia would consider this the real tragedy of the morning and would solve the rest by producing more bread from some impossible fold in her apron. She packs provisions for every emergency she can imagine. If you announced at breakfast that you planned a small campaign against a usurper, she would add onions, cured meat, and 2 spare cloths. Then she would ask whether you wanted beans with that. The thought steadies you more than it should. You hear a sharp cry from below the oaks. Remus has reached the lower fold of ground where the cattle path dips and vanishes. He has gone farther ahead than the rest, which is so unsurprising that it almost feels rude of the day to confirm it again. 2 of your men try to follow him and are turned aside by the crush. Now you see the shape of the trap more clearly. Numitor's herdsmen have used the trees and the fold of land well. While the main shouting gathers uphill, a tighter group below works the cattle through a narrow cut between rocks. The cut is barely a path at all. In spring, water runs there after rain. Now it is dry. It smells of dust, nettles, and old droppings baked by the sun. A broken branch hangs low across it and snags every cloak that passes. Remus charges straight into that bottleneck. He swings his staff in broad, angry arcs that mostly clear space and partly create new confusion. One man stumbles away from him, another ducks. The cattle bunch harder and begin to shove sideways against the thorn scrub. You move toward him at once. Up the ridge, you shout, not through the cut. Your order is sound. The ridge gives space. The cut gives trouble. But sound advice reaches Remus in the way rain reaches a stone jar with no lid, which is to say, some enters and most splashes elsewhere. He pushes 1 step too far. Then another, a pair of men close behind him. A third slides in from the side where the low branches hide movement. Suddenly your brother is on the far side of a living tangle of cloaks, horns, staffs, and irritated cattle. For one moment, he is visible from the chest up. His hair is full of leaves. His mouth is already set in that infuriating little smile. It suggests he is fully intended to become separated, and has only not mentioned it because the surprise improves the plan. Then a brindled flank blocks your view. You drive forward through the press. An elbow catches your ribs. A horn sweeps near your hip. You grab a man's belt and pull him clear before a cow steps on his foot and turns him into a lesson. Hold together, you call. Again the men answer you without pause. That part still comes strangely easy. You send the youngest to the outer edge where the ground is safer. You keep the older hands in the middle where the cattle need turning. You point one man toward the rise above the cut. He scrambles up among roots and loose stones. From there he can shout down where the gaps open. It is a simple thing, but it changes the shape of the scramble at once. You know where to place bodies on a hill, the way some men know where to place jars on a shelf. No one has taught you this in any formal way. Faustulus teaches weather, grazing, and the correct suspicion to bring to strangers. Yet when men bunch and panic, you feel the pattern beneath them as plainly as a woven mat under bare feet. Faustulus would grunt if you said that aloud. He would arrive at the worst possible moment carrying a wedge of goat cheese and a troubled look. Then he would stand in silence so long that even the cattle might begin confessing things merely to fill it. His silences are heavier than cloaks and rain. You wish you were here anyway. A herdsman grabs at your shoulder. You twist free and push him off balance with the flat of your forearm. He lands against a tree and looks more offended than hurt, as if the real insult is being corrected by a shepherd your own age. A dog darts through and steals somebody's dropped strip of bacon. That small theft feels almost elegant beside the rest. Below, the cattle raid starts to come apart. Your men have blocked the lower path with bodies and noise. The animals hesitate. A red cow turns back uphill. 2 calves blunder into a patch of fern and startle themselves with astonishing ease. One of Numitor's men shouts for the rear group to pull wide. That tells you there is a rear group. It also tells you they did not expect to say that part out loud. You lift your staff and point toward the trees. Cut them from the herd, you say. Leave the cattle room. This is the right choice, and you know it before the words finish. Men packed against cattle only make more trouble. Men pushed away from cattle become just men on a slope, which is easier for everyone, including the cattle who have no interest in serving as legal evidence. Your side shifts as one rough body. It is not tidy. Nothing about this morning is tidy. Your band opens a lane and then closes another, turning the raiders from the animals and toward the trees. A branch snaps near your ear. Leaves shower down and stick to sweaty necks. Dust rises through the shafts of light under the oaks. For a few moments the whole hillside smells green and bitter, as if the trees themselves have decided enough is enough. Someone loses a sandal. You do not see who. You only see the sandal lying upright in the grass with one strap torn. It waits there with tragic dignity while men stumble around it in one sock and one opinion. The line between the two groups dissolves. Now there are small knots everywhere. 2 men grapple by the thorn bush. 3 more shout over a calf that belongs to nobody present. 1 boy climbs a rock simply to keep his feet dry and ends up acting like a tiny general by accident. You almost laugh. He is farther down than before, near the low wall of loose stones by the dip. He has somehow reached it, which means he has also somehow gone beyond all sensible support. 2 men stand between him and you. Another moves around behind the wall. He is cut off. The moment feels strangely quiet inside your chest. The noise goes on around you, but your mind narrows to ground, distance, and the easiest route through. You know that wall. You patched part of it last autumn with your own hands. The stones are unstable on the west end. The scrub beside it hides a gap where goats slip through when they think nobody is looking. You angle right at once. "Marcus, with me," you call, though your eyes stay on the gap. The man comes. So do 2 others without being told. That happens more often now. You are not sure when it starts, but you feel it fully today. You move past a struggling pair and step onto the rougher ground. Here the thyme grows thicker between stones. It releases scent under every footfall. A lizard skitters away from your shadow and vanishes into a crack as if legal disputes are not among its duties. You duck under a branch and feel leaves brush your hair. The gap in the wall is still there. A goat could pass easily. A man can pass if he turns sideways and accepts a brief insult from the thorns. You accept the insult. Your tunic snags. You pull free with a soft rip at the hem. Beyond the wall, the slope falls into a small pocket of shade, where the air is cooler and the ground softer from old leaf mold. Remus is 3 paces away, and still busy, making matters worse. He has one hand on a man's staff and the other spread for balance. His sandals have churned the earth into a dark smear. There is a scratch on his cheek, and an expression that says this is all proceeding according to his private, terrible design. You would like to shake him and also laugh. Instead, you step in hard from the side. The first man sees you too late. Your shoulder catches him at the ribs and turns him away. The second tries to block the gap, but Marcus comes through after you and bundles him into the wall with more enthusiasm than grace. Now the space opens just enough. "Back," you tell Remus. He gives you the quick look he saves for moments when he nearly admits you were right. Then, he jerks his head toward the dip where 2 of the raiders still try to drive cattle through. Of course, there are still 2 more. You move together without speaking. That part is easy too. Whatever else you and Remus lack, you do not lack practice reading each other across a mess. He goes low toward the lead cow's head. You go for the men. One has mud to his knees. The other grips a rope with both hands and a face full of stubbornness. You strike the rope from his grip with the staff and send it falling into the nettles. The cow decides for everyone. She swings uphill in one broad turn. The cattle behind her follow at once. Herd minds are simple. They resemble crowd minds, but with fewer speeches and often better judgment. The 2 men leap aside to avoid the horns. By the time they regain footing, the lane is gone. Cattle flood back through the space toward your side, complaining in deep, offended voices, as if this whole operation has been a poor use of their morning. The pressure on the hillside changes. You feel it like a door opening in a crowded room. The tightness breaks. Men stop straining at once, because the animals no longer force them together. Shouting still goes on, but now it has more breath than panic. Remus wipes his cheek with the back of his hand. The smear of dirt only makes him look more pleased. He leans for one heartbeat against the loose stones with the lazy air of a man who has spent the last few moments arranging events exactly as desired. You give him a stare. He returns a look of pure innocence so practiced that it deserves a wreath. Around you, the tangled groups begin to pull apart. Numitor's men see the cattle turning and lose interest in principles. A few back away uphill. One retrieves his torn cloak from a thorn branch with great care, as if cloth injuries now matter more than all previous arguments. In truth, cloth injuries always matter. You gather your band with a whistle and raised arm. Again they come in around you. Faces turn, breathing slows. One boy has grass stuck in his hair and looks startled to find himself still holding 3 lengths of stolen rope, like some very minor conqueror. You tell him to keep them. That feels fair. The herd settles by degrees. Bells return to their calmer clanking. Dogs pant with their tongues out and pretend they have supervised wisely from the start. A calf noses a dropped water skin and recoils from the sour smell. You stand above the dip and count heads. Count the men first, count the cattle second. Count again, because mornings like this blur edges and trick the eye. Numbers settle the mind when tempers have done their best to scatter it. All yours are upright. That is enough for now. Across the slope, the other herdsmen gather in a ragged line near the stones where the day began. They still point and mutter, yet the force has gone out of them. Their neat little theft has unraveled under the oaks and lies there like a split basket. Somewhere far away, Numitor himself may hear of this. You only know him as the old king shut away while other men speak for him. You have never seen him sit, but rumor says he can make a stone floor look like a throne simply by lowering himself onto it. That sounds difficult and slightly unfair to ordinary furniture. For the moment, all you see are his men retreating with bruised pride and fewer hopes than before. The boundary stones remain where they are. The thorn bush still refuses to testify. The chalk marks look even more foolish now. A blackbird lands on the higher stone and cocks its head, as if waiting for the humans to present a better case. Remus comes up beside you and rolls his shoulder. You were slow, his grin says. You were impossible, your silence answers. This is an old exchange too. Below, the Tiber still shines in the valley. Sheep bells still answer the breeze. Wood smoke drifts from some distant hut where somebody sensible has stayed home and put a pot on the fire instead of wrestling over grass. You breathe in and taste dust, thyme, and the warm animal smell of the saved herd. Then you begin the useful work. You send 2 boys after the strays. You set 1 man to right the wall where stones have fallen. You collect dropped ropes, a cracked cup, 3 olives, and the lonely sandal, which looks no happier for being found. The morning mends itself in small pieces. That is how most of life goes on the Alban hills. Quarrels rise, sheep wander, bread gets dusty, then somebody ties a knot, counts the animals, and decides the stew tonight should be thicker. The hillside still smells of crushed thyme and warm sheep after the scuffle fades into grumbling. You stand in bent grass with dust on your shins and a splinter in your palm. A few sheep bells keep clanking as if nothing important has happened at all. The sound drifts over the Alban slope in small stubborn notes. Your herdsmen gather in loose knots among the rocks and scrub oak. 1 man straightens his belt. Another spits grit. A third checks his ear because someone caught him there with a very ordinary fist. The cattle snort and toss their heads below you. Their hides shine red and brown in the sun. Their tails switch at flies with a lazy skill that makes every human effort look a little wasteful. You pick up a dropped staff and test the weight in your hand. The wood is smooth where fingers have held it for years. Fresh bark shows pale where it's split on stone. A sandal strap has snapped on your left foot. You knot it again with a strip of leather. The knot looks ugly and works perfectly, which is most country repairs. Around you, men count animals in low voices. They touch backs and horns as they pass. They know each beast by its white star, its torn ear, or its habit of pretending not to hear. The morning air carries wood smoke from far farm huts near Alba Longa. It also brings the silver glint of the Tiber far below in the valley. The river looks peaceful from here, as rivers always do when they are not personally bothering you. One of the younger herdsmen laughs too hard at nothing. He does it because his knees are still shaking. Another man finds a dent in his water jar and sighs over it with more feeling than he gave the fight itself. You crouch near a trampled patch of grass and press dirt from your knuckles. Dust turns to mud where sweat touches it. A bee noses around your wrist, decides you are not a flower, and moves on. The men talk over each other in quick pieces. Numitor's pasture, stolen cattle, too many hotheads, the same old valley arguments, only with more bruises than usual. Someone says Remus chased the last group farther downhill than anyone else. The words land with a flat little weight. With Remus, anything that goes wrong has usually had time to greet him first. You lift your head at once. You scan the slope near the thorn bushes and the line of alder by the spring. You expect him to emerge grinning with dirt in his hair and a fresh reason why you are all too slow. He does not emerge from anywhere. That fact sits in your chest more heavily than it should. Remus is usually impossible to miss. because he moves through a day like a man trying to arrive before it begins. An older herdsman limps over with a rope burn across his hand. He tells you 3 men seized your brother near the lower track. They had cloaks marked with Alba's dark border and the bored faces of men following orders. Another swears Remus swung at them anyway. Of course he did. Your brother can meet a locked gate and still behave as if the gate is the one being unreasonable. You ask how many men took him. 2 say 5, 1 says 7. This is how counting works after a scramble. When everyone is full of dust and certainty, you look downhill toward the road to Alba Longa. It lies pale across the green like a strip of worn cloth. A handful of moving shapes is already too far away to name. The cattle matter. Men start whole feuds over less. Still, you know at once this is no longer about horned property wandering over a boundary line. You step through the herd and keep counting in your head. Men you trust. Men who can hold a line. Men who can keep a secret for one afternoon, which is a rarer gift. A black cow nudges your shoulder for salt on your skin. You push her aside and she blinks at you with soft surprise. Even now, daily life insists on itself. One of the boys brings you your spear with the shaft scraped raw near the middle. He also brings your cloak, which now smells of sheep wool, sun, and someone else's sweat. You throw it over your shoulders anyway. A ransom is the clean answer if these men want compensation and dignity. Rescue is the rough answer if they want theater. You prefer the clean answer, though the hills rarely let a man choose neatly. You ask who among Numitor's people still remembers fair dealing. 3 names come back at once. 2 are old shepherds. 1 is a gate guard with a wife who likes good honey. That helps a little. Honey has opened more doors than arguments ever do. Bread helps too, which is why Acca Laurentia trusts loaves more than nearly any plan. You imagine her already wrapping barley bread in cloth for a journey nobody has yet announced. If the roof falls in, Acca reaches for stew first and questions second. A man brings you a skin of thin wine. You take 1 swallow and hand it on. It tastes of leather and sour grapes and a hint of rosemary because somebody stored it near herbs again. The sun has climbed high enough to warm the backs of your calves. Sweat dries under your tunic. Dust sticks at the edge of the neck where the cloth rubs and rubs. You send 2 boys to watch the lower road from a stand of pines. You send another man to fetch a mule. You do not say armed rescue, but your hands are already thinking in knots and straps. The herdsmen settle because you tell them where to stand and what to do. Men breathe easier when work appears. Counting rope and sharpening a knife feel kinder than waiting. You have a small purse with 3 silver pieces, 6 bronze bits, and a bead of blue glass. It is not a king's ransom. It is enough to begin a conversation, especially if the conversation starts with an apology and a goat. You think of Remus trying to behave like a humble prisoner and nearly smile. The image fails at once. Humility fits him like a borrowed shoe and usually on the wrong foot. A lark sings over the hill, as if this is a fine ordinary morning. Somewhere below, a woman calls children in for a meal. The world keeps moving in its usual calm way, which feels almost rude. Then you see a familiar figure coming over the rise. He carries a wrapped wedge under one arm. He also carries a silence so large it reaches camp before he does. Faustulus walks with his old shepherd's stride. His feet know every stone. His cloak hangs from one shoulder, patched at the hem and smelling faintly of lanolin, smoke and rain that fell 3 days ago. The goat cheese is wrapped in fig leaves and tied with reed fiber. He always brings food when timing would be more useful. It is one of his most steady gifts. Today his face looks carved from weathered olive wood. The lines around his mouth are deeper. His shoulders seem to have remembered every year of carrying wet fleece uphill. He stops near you and says nothing at all. He shifts the cheese from one hand to the other. He studies your face with the odd care of a man checking a cracked jar for new damage. You wait for the usual gruff question about lost sheep or cracked pots. Instead, you get silence, heavier than any man's silence has a right to be. It settles over the camp like a blanket nobody asked for. One of the herdsmen clears his throat and wanders away at once. Even the boys stop pretending to sort stones. When Faustulus goes this quiet, sensible people suddenly become busy elsewhere. You tell him Remus has been taken to Alba Longa. You say it plainly. The words seem to strike him in the chest and stay there. His hand tightens around the fig leaf wrapping. A little goat oil darkens one corner. He looks down at it as if he has arrived carrying the wrong tool for the day, which in a way he has. You ask if he knows the men who took your brother. He does not answer that question. He looks past you to the valley and the silver thread of the Tiber far below. The wind lifts the wool at his temple. It shows more gray than last winter. He inhales through his nose as if he means to speak, then thinks better of it, then almost tries again. You know Faustulus as a man of short words and long labor. You know the shape of his hands, cracked at the knuckles and stained by nettles. You know the sound he makes when a lamb is about to do something foolish. You do not know this silence. It is new and old at once. It feels like something buried under your house floor that has finally decided to knock. He sets the cheese on a flat stone between you. It leaves a damp ring on the surface. For a moment you think this might be the whole visit, which would be maddening and very much his style. Then he says your name very slowly. He says it as if weighing each part. Even that small sound seems to tire him. You answer at once. He nods, though you have not yet asked anything new. He stands there with his jaw set and his eyes narrowed against light that is not especially bright. The camp smells of trampled grass, sour milk and sheep dung warming in the sun. A pot near the fire still holds porridge skin at the edges. Ordinary things crowd around this strange pause and make it stranger. You ask him whether there is some tie between Remus and Alba's old king. You ask because his face tells you there is a road here, and he has spent years stepping around it. His gaze flicks to your hands. It lingers on your shoulders. Then it rises to your forehead, where damp hair curls despite your best efforts to keep it cut short and sensible. At last he says he has kept a thing too long. The words come rough and dry. They sound like a gate that has not been opened since winter. You feel the day narrow around that sentence. The sheep bells continue down the slope. A fly lands on the cheese, and you flick it away without looking. He says there were tokens with you as babies. He says the word babies with a care that nearly breaks him. You stare at him and feel your breath go shallow. He does not rush now. Perhaps he cannot. He speaks in pieces, with long gaps, as if each piece has hooks in it. He tells you he found you and Remus near the river many years ago. He tells you there was a basket caught in reeds. He tells you the water had left silt on the cloth and a smell of river weed on your blankets. You know the old tale everyone half laughs over at dinner fires. A she-wolf, a cave, the ancient world's most unorthodox fostering contract. 0 stars for hygiene, 5 stars for outcomes. Faustulus does not smile at the story now. He says only that hungry babies cry the same, whether nursed by woman, beast, or rumor, that he rubs his brow at the back of his wrist. He says there were signs of noble birth, a small clasp, a strip of fine woven cloth unlike shepherd wool, a feeling, he adds, and then sounds annoyed at himself for saying something so vague. You think of your own life in quick, bright scraps. Sheep pens at dawn, frost on a bucket rim, Remus racing downhill, because walking is apparently for lesser beings. Faustulus says he kept the tokens hidden. He kept them because men in Alba were looking for lost children then. He kept them because Amulius had essentially tried to delete the backup files of the royal line and forgotten that nature saves automatically to the cloud. The joke is too strange for the moment, but your mind catches it anyway. Nature, it seems, is a poor keeper of political instructions and an excellent keeper of inconvenient twins. You ask whether he means Numitor's line. You hear your own voice from a little distance. It sounds calm, in the way a lake can look calm while cold water sits far below. Faustulus nods once. He says Numitor had a daughter shut away. He says whispers moved through huts and courtyards. He says 2 newborn boys vanished, and soldiers asked questions with careful smiles. He does not need to. The shape of the thing stands there between you, plain as a gatepost. Your palms feel hot. You wipe them on your tunic and only add more dust. The cloth scratches at your skin where old seams sit thick. The men nearby pretend very hard not to listen. One of them has taken up sharpening a knife that is already sharp enough to split sunbeams. Another studies a bucket with scholarly devotion. You ask why. He tells you now. The answer is obvious and still needs saying. Remus has gone into Alba not as a thief from the hills, but as a young man with a face somebody may remember. Faustulus looks toward the road again. His mouth tightens. He says old blood can show through dirt and sheep wool more easily than a man hopes. Far below your camp, your brother is already walking under guard on that pale road. His hands are bound, but not very well. The men beside him have not yet learned that poor knots are a kind of invitation. Dust coats his calves to the knee. A thorn has caught in the hem of his tunic. He carries himself with that same loose pride he uses when he returns late and claims the delay improved the outing. The guards prod him along with the flat of their staves. They are not cruel men. They are tired men with midday sweat darkening their belts and thoughts fixed on lunch. One chews fennel seeds to sweeten his breath. Another has a sandal sole patched with 3 little bronze tacks. A third keeps hitching up his spear because the strap pinches his shoulder. Remus asks for water twice before the first mile ends. He gets it once, because even guards dislike listening to him explain thirst as a personal grievance. He drinks too quickly and wipes his mouth on his arm. The road bends through low scrub and pale stones. Lizards dart across the warm edges. The smell changes as they go, from open thyme and dry grass to smoke, dung, and bread from the farms nearer the town. They pass a woman rinsing wool in a shallow trough. She watches without much surprise. Men under guard are common enough. A young man arguing while under guard is commoner still. Your brother cannot resist speaking. He says the cattle crossed first. He says a boundary line means little to a cow. He says justice should take this into account and perhaps also offer him a better lunch. The oldest guard tells him to save his wit. Remus answers that he is trying. This is not helpful, but it is very much in character. At a stream crossing, he nearly slips on algae dart stones. He catches himself and then glances around with a smug expression, as if he had the situation perfectly in hand from the start. Gravity receives no apology. The walls of Alba Longa rise ahead in warm brown stone. They sit along the ridge with an old settled pride. Smoke curls above rooflines, and bright cloth hangs from one upper yard to dry. Goats crop weeds beside the outer ditch. 2 children squat in the dust making little roads with sticks. They stop to stare at the prisoners and go right back to their game, because childhood gives almost everything the same rank of interest. The gate timbers are thick and iron dark at the bands. One hinge groans when the leaf opens. The sound carries under the archway and makes the place feel older than the hill itself. Remus walks through without lowering his eyes. He notices everything, because that is another of his gifts. He sees the chipped stone at knee height where carts scrape. The garland remains above a shrine niche, and the baker carrying trays with burned fingertips. Inside, Alba smells of ash, hot grain, olives, damp clay, and human closeness. It is a town smell, layered and steady. After the hillside, it feels like stepping into a woven basket full of different lives. A dog sleeps in the shade of a wall and does not move. A potter's boy runs past with red slip on both elbows. Somewhere a hammer taps bronze with patient, expensive little sounds. Your brother is led up a street that turns twice before opening into a court. The paving is uneven. Water from a spilled jar snakes between stones and darkens the dust in cool threads. This matter of stolen cattle reaches ears above the level of ordinary guards because Numitor's men are involved. Your brother is not brought before Amulius first. Fate, for once, chooses the more interesting clerk's desk. Numitor waits in a chamber that was meant to make a prisoner feel smaller. It has done the opposite for 20 years. He sits on a stone seat and somehow turns the room into a hall of judgment simply by remaining very still. A folded cloak rests beside him with perfect edges. A lamp burns cleanly near the wall. A basin of water stands close by, and even the water seems to mind its manners in his presence. His hair is white now. His back is still straight. Time has taken some things, and failed to take the part that tells everyone else where a king should sit. When Remus is brought in, Numitor lifts his eyes with old caution. He expects another loud shepherd with a cattle complaint. He gets that, certainly, but not only that. Your brother has dust on his cheeks and one bruise rising near the jaw. He also has a face that strikes the old man like a remembered tune played on a rough pipe. The notes are imperfect. The pattern is not. Numitor does not show much at first. Men who survive courts learn economy. Still, one hand settles more firmly on the edge of the stone seat. He asks Remus his name. He asks it in a voice that is soft enough to make the room lean in. The guards answer too quickly, but Numitor waits for the young man himself. Remus gives his name, and your father's shepherd name after it, as he always has. He says it with pride, because a good flock and a full winter store are honors in the hills. He adds that the cattle matter is foolish. Numitor's gaze stays on him a moment too long for an ordinary dispute. He asks his age. He asks where he was raised. He asks if he has kin. The questions are simple. Their order is not. Even your brother notices that much. Remus says he has a brother. He says it first and with no pause, which would please you if you were there to hear it. Then he says he was raised on the Alban hills by shepherds who work harder than most lords. Numitor studies the line of his brow and the set of his mouth. He hears the answer and also hears old whispers moving under it. Long closed rooms in memory begin opening one by one. He asks whether the brothers were always known to be shepherd-born. A guard shifts his weight at that. The question has wandered from cattle with very little warning, who loves a straight road best and rarely gets one, narrows his eyes. He says he knows what his parents told him. He says anything else would be another man's gossip. It is a fair answer. It is also the sort of answer that sharpens interest, instead of calming it. Your brother has many talents, and accidental mystery is one of them. Numitor leans back a little. The stone behind him should look plain and cold. In his presence it looks almost ceremonial, which is a deeply inconvenient skill in a captive. He asks about marks of birth. He asks about tokens. He asks whether any strange tale clung to the brothers in childhood. Each question is gentle. Each one lands with care. Remus laughs once through his nose. He says there is always a strange tale. Hillside folk can turn a basket and a riverbank into a dinner story for 800 years, if given half a chance. A faint smile touches the old man's mouth and disappears. The answer has the shape of youth and the color of pain. It also has an echo he cannot place without wanting very much to place it. He motions for water to be brought. A servant pours from a clay jug into a plain cup. Remus drinks while Numitor watches the line of his hand against the cup's rim. There is a family likeness in gestures before there is one in words. The old king sees it and feels a small cold wave move through him. Hope, after long years, can be almost embarrassing. He does not speak the thought aloud. Courts teach caution. Prison teaches it twice. Instead, he asks about your brother's foster father. He asks his name. He asks where his hut stands. A map is quietly being drawn behind his eyes. Remus answers because water has softened him, and because the room is cooler than the street. He still keeps his chin lifted. If he were any more himself, he would probably begin correcting the household on sheep management. Back on the hillside, you stand with Faustulus while the last of the story settles between you. The goat cheese sits forgotten in the sun. Its edge is beginning to soften and shine. You ask where the tokens are hidden. He says under a loose stone beneath the grain chest. He says Akka has dusted over that stone for years and never once pried, which is either trust or excellent manners. He says he meant to tell you when you were older. Then he says he meant to tell you last spring. Then he stops, because there is no tidy age for telling a man he has been living beside a throne in a sheepfold. You almost laugh at the absurdity of it. The sound does not quite come. You have spent your life mending fences while a usurper in Alba tries to outrun a nursery problem from 20 years ago. Amulius, it seems, spent 2 decades trying to erase errors, and only made them better at climbing hills. Nature saved the file anyway, and stored 1 copy in each of you. Faustulus exhales through his nose. Some small part of him seems lighter for having spoken. Another part seems older at once. You do not have time to sit with any of it. Remus is inside Alba now. Numitor may be friend, stranger, or a mix of both, but Amulius is still above him like bad weather. You begin naming what is needed: a mule, 3 steady men, bread, water skins, the small purse, a knife with a decent edge and no family story attached to it. Faustulus nods at once now that motion has returned to him. Action suits him better than confession. He picks up the cheese and tucks it back under his arm because no household ever improves by wasting goat cheese. You send 1 boy to run for Akka. He leaves in a spray of dust. You know exactly what will happen when he reaches the hut. She will hear the words Alba and Remus and Prince in some terrible order. Then she will wrap bread, ladle stew into a pot with a lid, and add dried figs because crisis is hungry work. The thought steadies you more than it should. Bread has a way of making the future seem negotiable. So does a mother who believes every hard journey is improved by 1 more loaf. The hillside wind cools the sweat at your neck. Sheep shift and crop the grass in calm little bites. Down in the valley the Tiber flashes once between willows, bright as a blade and far less troublesome. You look toward Alba Longa and test the weight of your spear again. It feels familiar in your hand, but not as familiar as the staff you carried all morning. That fact matters. You are still the same man who rose with the flock at dawn. Your tunic still smells of smoke. There is dirt under your nails. Royal blood, if that is what it is, has not improved your footwear. Faustulus stands beside you with his weathered face turned to the road. For once, his silence is no longer empty. It is full of names, places, and years. And somehow, that is easier to bear. You tell the men you go first to speak, if speech will serve. You tell them steel stays quiet unless there is no better choice. This is a cattle matter until it proves otherwise. They nod, relieved to hear the world described in manageable pieces. Rope, mule, bread, road. Even lost princes are easier to face when someone remembers the water skins. In the town below, your brother sits under watch and answers an old king's gentle questions. On the hill above, you gather your cloak, your purse, and the shape of a life that is suddenly widened. The air smells of wild thyme again as the breeze shifts. Sheep bells ring in the distance with the same calm notes as before. The day goes on, patient and sunlit, while you turn your face toward Alba. The morning lies soft over the Alban hills when Faustulus finds you by the sheep pen. You have one hand on a gatepost. Your other hand is full of a strap that needs mending. Wild thyme warms under the sun. Wood smoke drifts from lower huts. Far below, the Tiber flashes like a strip of beaten silver. The sheep bells knock together in slow little notes. A lamb noses your knee and then loses interest. The air smells of wool, dust, and damp earth still cool from night. Faustulus arrives, as he always does, at the worst possible moment. He carries a wedge of goat cheese wrapped in cloth. He also carries his usual troubled look. The cheese seems lighter than the look. His silence, as usual, weighs more than both. You expect him to point at the broken latch. You expect him to complain about straying sheep. You do not expect him to stop beside the pen and stare down the valley as if the whole of Latium has become awkward. He sets the cheese on a flat stone. That alone tells you something is wrong. Faustulus never sets down food unless the matter is serious. Laurentia says this is how men announce feelings when words seem too expensive. You wait. Faustulus rubs his jaw with the heel of his hand. He looks at the hills. He looks at the sheep. He looks at you last, which is never a good sign. Then he lowers himself onto the stone beside the cheese. The stone is warm on one side and cool on the other. Dust lifts from his tunic when he sits. His sandals are white with dry chalk from the slope. His shoulders seem even heavier than yesterday, which hardly seems fair to shoulders. You crouch across from him. You rest your arms on your knees. You know this shape of waiting from storms and sick lambs and broken fences. The sheep crop the grass with patient little tears. A fly lands on the goat cheese. Faustulus does not brush it away. That is another sign. When he speaks, his voice sounds scraped thin. He tells you there is something he should have said many years ago. He says he hoped for a quieter time. Then he glances at the sky, as if time itself has failed to keep an appointment. You say nothing. Silence works better with him than prying. He taught you that without ever meaning to. Faustulus folds and unfolds the edge of the cloth around the cheese. His thick fingers move slowly. He says that on a morning many years ago, he walks down toward the riverbank before sunrise, because one of the ewes has wandered lower than any sensible ewe ought to wander. You can see the path at once in your mind. It winds between low scrub and pale stones. It smells of mint, where the ground keeps a little damp. It drops toward reeds and soft mud, and the broad sound of moving water. He says the Tiber is swollen then. The current moves brown and strong around roots and driftwood. Bits of foam catch in the reeds. The bank is marked with fresh wet lines where the river has risen and thought better of it. He hears crying before he sees anything else. At first he thinks it is a marsh bird. Then he thinks it is two marsh birds in a very bad mood. Then he hears the clear, thin wail of infants, and no shepherd in Latium mistakes that sound. He stands up from the stone as he tells it. He cannot stay seated for this part. His hands shape the air as if the basket still floats before him. He says there is a wicker basket lodged in the roots of a fig tree near the bank. The reeds shiver around it. Water laps at its side. The lid has slipped back. Inside are two babies. You do not move. You can smell the river mud from his words. You can almost hear the slap of water on wicker. The sheep bells on the hillside go on with their small, dull clanks, as if nothing in the world has changed. Faustulus says the babies are wrapped in wool cloth better than any shepherd owns. The cloth is damp at the edges. One baby is asleep for a moment. The other is furious, in a way only very small babies can manage. He looks at you then. He does not need to say which one that is. You breathe out through your nose. Remus, you think. Whatever goes wrong today, Remus gets there first. Apparently he begins early. Faustulus gives the tiniest bend at the corner of his mouth. It is not quite a smile. On him, it counts as laughter. Then his face grows grave again. He says he is not alone there. He says when he reaches the tree, a she-wolf stands over the basket. The wind shifts and carries the sharp green smell of crushed thyme. Somewhere behind you, a ewe sneezes. The ordinary sounds feel almost rude. You look at Faustulus and try to picture him young enough to be startled. It takes some work. He says the animal is lean and gray. Her ribs show beneath her coat. Her ears stand high. Her eyes are bright in the dim dawn. She does not snarl at him. She does not flee. She lowers her head over the basket. She licks one small face. Then she lies beside the roots and lets the babies feed. Faustulus says this in the flat tone of a man still annoyed by what he himself has seen. You stare at the dust between your sandals. You press your thumb into the leather strap in your hand until the edge marks your skin. The she-wolf nursing arrangement, you think dimly, is the ancient world's most unorthodox fostering contract. 0 stars for hygiene, 5 stars for outcomes. Faustulus goes on. He says a woodpecker hops along the roots and keeps watch from a branch. He says the dawn grows pale behind the trees. He says the wolf lifts her head only once, as if to ask whether he means trouble. He tells you he does not mean trouble. He tells her so aloud because when a wolf is feeding 2 babies, clear manners seem wise. At last the wolf rises. She noses the basket once. Then she slips into the scrub and is gone. The reeds sway after her. The crying starts again almost at once, which feels very human. Faustulus says he waits a little longer. He says he kneels by the basket. He says your hands are red and waving. He says your brother has somehow worked 1 foot free and is kicking at the world like a man already dissatisfied with management. You can almost hear Acca Laurentia laughing at that part. You can also hear her saying, as she often does, that babies arrive hungry, kings arrive hungry, and there is no point pretending otherwise. Faustulus lifts the goat cheese and turns it in his hand. The rind leaves a little grease on his thumb. He says he takes the basket home because no one with a soul leaves children on a riverbank, no matter how strange the morning has become. He says Acca Laurentia opens the door before he can knock. She sees the basket. She sees his face. She says very calmly that she will put more water in the stew. Your foster mother believes every event improves with bread and soup. A fever needs broth. A wedding needs stew. A royal secret, you suspect, also gets extra barley and 1 more onion. The breeze cools the sweat on your neck. The latch strap hangs forgotten from your hand. You say at last that this cannot be the whole tale. Faustulus nods. He sits again. He looks older now that the first words are out. He says there is more. There has always been more. He says a shepherd hears things when he brings lambs and cheese to market. He hears more when palace servants think wool smells too rustic to matter. He hears most when men believe poor people are furniture. Below you the valley shines in layers of haze. The road to Alba Longa runs pale along the slope. You know it by every bend and dust patch. Faustulus says there is a woman in Alba Longa, whose name he learns long ago. Her name is Rhea Silvia. She is daughter to Numitor, who should be king. She is made a Vestal by force, so she will have no children to threaten another man's rule. He spits into the dust after that last part. It lands dark and vanishes. He says the other man is Amulius, Numitor's brother, who takes the throne and then spends years trying to make the throne less crowded. Amulius, he says, has essentially tried to delete the backup files of the royal line and forgotten that nature saves automatically to the cloud. The saying means nothing to the sheep. It pleases you all the same. Faustulus does not quite understand why your mouth twitches, but he allows it. He says that though Rhea Silvia is made a Vestal, she bears twin sons. Some say Mars is their father. Some whisper it and look upward. Some whisper it and look toward the palace door. You sit very still on the dry grass. Mars is a name you know from little shrine fires and old songs. He belongs to spearheads and spring fields and the red planet above dark hills. He does not belong, in any ordinary way, to your own bare feet and sun-cracked hands. Faustulus says Amulius hears of the twins and gives the usual hard order of frightened kings. He orders the babies exposed. He chooses a river because powerful men are often lazy in their imagination. If water carries away a problem, they call that wisdom. The bees move in the thyme beside your knee. Their bodies shine like polished seeds. One vanishes deep into a purple flower. Faustulus says the servant who carries out the order may lack either cruelty or nerve, perhaps both. The river is high, the bank is slick, the basket is made stoutly. One small mercy joins another, and the Tiber refuses to cooperate with murder. He says that is how he finds you. He says nothing for years because two healthy boys are easier to keep alive when no one counts them. He says a shepherd's hut is the last place a usurper looks for princes. And an insulting amount of practical work. You look over the pasture. The sheep huddle where the shade lies thin along a wall. Your dog scratches and circles twice before lying down again. Everything is as it was an hour ago. Nothing is as it was an hour ago. You ask him whether Acca Laurentia knows all of this. Faustulus gives you a look that answers before he speaks. He says your mother knows enough to pack bread for any possible disaster. If she thought you might discover a lost throne by noon, she would wrap olives for the road by breakfast. That also sounds exactly like her. He says she knows the basket, she knows the cloth, she knows the rumors from Alba Longa, she knows the signs on the little trinkets found with you both. She has kept them hidden in a jar beneath folded blankets, because some mothers keep herbs there, and some keep dynastic evidence. He reaches into his tunic and draws out a small bundle. The cloth is old, but clean. He has folded it many times. Inside lie two tiny things that fit in his broad palm. One is a pin of worked bronze. The other is a seal token, worn smooth at the edges, stamped with a mark from Numitor's house. Your throat tightens around nothing. You do not reach at once. You only look. The bronze catches the sun in a dull, warm gleam. The token lies quiet and plain, as if it has not spent years hiding in darkness and waiting to become important. Faustulus places them on the stone between you. He says he keeps them because he is never sure whether truth helps or harms. He says he tells himself each year that next year will be better. Then next year brings more sheep, more storms, more mending, and no safer world. You pick up the bronze pin. It is cool first, then it warms in your fingers. The worked lines are shallow from wear. You trace them with your thumb and think of a woman you have never seen, fastening a cloth around a child who cannot hold up his own head. Rhea Silvia. The name sits in your mind like a pebble dropped into deep water. It falls through layers you have not known were there. Daughter of a king, forced into holy service, mother of twins, mother of you. You ask whether she lives. Faustulus looks toward Alba Longa before answering. He says he does not know for certain. In stories, such women fade into temples and rumors. In real life, he says, palace walls keep their own counsel, which is a dull phrase for a cruel habit. The breeze grows stronger. It lifts the hair at your temple. It rattles the dry seed heads along the path. You ask whether he truly believes the tale of Mars. Faustulus scratches his beard and considers this with more care than many men give the weather. He says he believes two things without doubt. He believes you are born of high blood. He believes the world takes odd pleasure in doing things twice, when once would already be strange enough. He glances at the hills, at your shoulders, at the way you sit. Then he says a shepherd can tell a lamb from a wolfhound, even if both are wet and shouting. He says you and Remus have never moved through life like sons of nobody. That might sound grand from another man. From Faustulus, it lands like a fact about fence posts. You lower your eyes to the token again. Royal blood feels too large for your hands. Divine blood feels larger still. You would rather repair 10 gates, or drive stubborn rams from a barley patch, or listen to Acca Laurentia argue with a cooking pot. Instead, you sit with a little bronze pin on your palm. Your skin is dusty. A nick on your knuckle has dried white at the edge. Your knees ache from crouching. None of this resembles the son of Mars. Then again, perhaps gods are less tidy than shrines suggest. Across the valley, Alba Longa lies pale against the slope. Its walls are small in this distance. Its roofs shine here and there through cypress and smoke. You think of Remus there. He went down toward the town with his usual easy stride and his usual talent for reaching trouble before anyone else. If a revelation is waiting in Alba Longa, you think, Remus has likely found it and leaned against it with a smug face already. The thought steadies you more than solemn thought can do. Faustulus watches your face. He has never liked speeches. Today he likes them even less. He says only that if Numitor still lives, and if the old signs are true, then the man in Alba Longa has grandsons walking the hills in shepherd's cloaks. The sheep begin to drift toward shade. Midday gathers softly over the grass. A hawk circles high enough to seem almost still. Faustulus takes longer to answer than he takes to milk a stubborn goat. At last, he says, the world has started asking the same questions he has kept buried. He says Remus was seen in Alba Longa. He says there was a quarrel, an arrest, and too many curious eyes. None of that sounds unlike your brother. Faustulus says old men begin to compare faces. They count years. They remember stories they once pretended not to know. Secrets age badly, he says. They start to smell like onions forgotten in a damp sack. You almost laugh, and the almost matters. Then he says something that stills even that small breath. He says if Numitor has seen Remus, the old king may already be asking his own questions. He may be sitting somewhere within those walls, looking at your brother's face and seeing a ghost returned in duplicate. The valley seems wider suddenly. It is not truly wider. The same river bends through the same light. The same bells ring from the same flock. Yet you feel two hillsides inside one morning, and one truth moving toward itself from opposite sides. In Alba Longa, the stone under Remus is colder. He does not sit on a hillside rock. He sits on a smooth floor inside a room that smells faintly of olive oil, old wood, and shut air. Light falls through a high opening and draws a pale square near his feet. You do not see him, yet you know him well enough to picture him there. His wrists are free by now because no one can keep Remus tied for long without creating more work than peace. He leans as if the room belongs to him. He wears dust on his hem and a shallow scrape on one cheek. He looks, no doubt, as if he has arranged the whole inconvenience for his own amusement. Numitor sits across from him. The old man needs no carved chair to look regal. He can make a plain stone seat feel ceremonial by lowering himself onto it. His robe falls in measured folds. His hands rest quietly on his knees. Even his breathing seems better trained than most men's speech. He does not question Remus like a guard. He questions him like a patient farmer sorting grain. He asks where your brother is from. He asks who raises him. He asks how long Faustulus has kept sheep on the Alban slopes. He asks whether there was ever talk, old and odd, around the hearth fire on winter nights. Remus answers because he likes an audience almost as much as he likes escaping one. He gives the names plainly. He gives the hills. He gives the hut. He gives Acca Laurentia with her bread and her certainty that every problem can be eaten into submission. He gives Faustulus with his silences, his weathered face, and his tragic habit of arriving during the good parts. Numitor listens without interrupting. Sometimes he touches one finger to his lip. Sometimes his eyes narrow just a little, not in anger but in thought. Each answer seems to settle somewhere inside him beside an older piece. He asks whether you and Remus are twins. Remus says yes, and likely says it with that half-smirk of his, as if being born in pairs is an ordinary enough accomplishment. He says you are alike enough to confuse strangers, and unlike enough that no one keeps the mistake for long. Numitor asks how old you both are. He asks in a tone so mild it almost disappears, yet age matters. Years are the small pegs on which whole lives hang. Remus gives the number, and the old man's hand stills completely on his knee. Somewhere in the palace a servant carries a water jar down a hall. The sound comes hollow through stone. A swallow chatters under the eaves outside the window slit. Numitor asks whether either of you bears marks from birth, a twist in the ear, a line on the shoulder, any sign a woman might remember when memory is all she has left. Remus thinks. He answers. You know the mark he means before the old man says why. You have a small pale patch near your side where the skin curls like a half-moon. Remus has one close to the same place. Acca Laurentia once called them matching thumbprints left by impatient gods. Numitor closes his eyes for one short moment. When he opens them, the calm in his face does not break. it only deepens. A man who has waited 20 years does not waste his feeling unflinching. He asks one more thing. He asks whether Faustulus ever found anything with the twins, a pin, a cloth, a token, something too fine for shepherd life, kept for no reason anyone can explain. Remus, who notices more than he admits, remembers the old jar beneath blankets. He remembers once seeing Acca Laurentius swat Faustulus's hand away from it with a spoon. He remembers the shape of secrecy, even if not its full contents. Those answers are enough. Numitor leans back on his stone seat, and the bare room somehow becomes a chamber of state. He looks at your brother, and in that face he sees a daughter lost to him, a line interrupted, and then quietly restored. He tells Remus that there was once a girl named Rhea Silvia. He tells it slowly, because slow words carry farther. He says she is his child. He says Amulius fears the children she might bear. He says fear in a palace often dresses itself as duty and calls for holy vows. Remus, for once, keeps still. Numitor says Rhea Silvia is forced into the service of Vesta, not by piety but by politics. He says a king without right learns to fear babies more than armies. It is almost funny in its own small way, though not for the babies. He says she later bears twin sons. Some say Mars comes to her. Some say the god's name helps people bear the scandal of power. Numitor does not settle the matter. He only says the children are born, and that is miracle enough for one story. He says Amulius orders the infants removed. He says the servants are told to expose them by the river. He says the order returns empty of proof, which in those days passes for success, if everyone agrees not to inspect it too closely. Remus listens with his chin lifted. That is his habit when the world grows strange. He looks ready to argue with it. Yet inside, the words are finding places they were always meant to fit. Back on the hillside, Faustulus tells the same story from the other end. He tells it with less marble and more mud. He knows the palace only by rumor, but he knows the riverbank well. He knows what reeds do in floodwater. He knows how a basket catches under roots. He knows the weight of 2 babies carried uphill. You sit on the grass and hear the tale close around your life. Your mother is not only the woman who stirs the stew, she is also the woman who wraps bread in cloth and kisses your brow when you leave before dawn. Your father is not only the god in the tale, he is also the quiet man before you in all the ways that matter to daily life. Love, you think, keeps more than one kind of account. Faustulus says no man can say what share a god has in any child. He shrugs at that. Then he says he has seen you run up these slopes at sunrise, and that frankly, ordinary parentage also seems unlikely. You bark one soft laugh at last. The sound startles a bird from the wall. It flits low and vanishes into broom. The laugh fades, but leaves a little space for breathing. Faustulus nods, satisfied by small things. He says that whatever blood flows in you, it has learned to mend a pen and trim a hoof. He says noble birth does not keep rain off your shoulders. He has practical standards for greatness. You look again toward Alba Longa. Heat softens the far walls. Thin smoke rises straight from a cooking fire before the breeze catches it. You imagine Numitor speaking. You imagine Remus hearing. Separated by one valley, you both sit before older men at nearly the same hour, each being handed the first page of your own life. The thought is so strange it becomes simple. In one place, a shepherd sets down goat cheese and truth. In another, a king sets down pride and memory. Between them lies a river that once carried a basket, and failed to carry it far enough. Faustulus asks whether you understand. You could say no. You could say yes. Both would be true, and neither would help. So you tell him you hear him. That is enough for now. He accepts that. He wraps the goat cheese again, because even revelations should not dry out in the sun. He tucks the little tokens back into their cloth. His hands shake only once. If he notices, he gives no sign. In Alba Longa, Numitor likely does the same with his own feelings. He does not throw up his hands. He does not call trumpets. He asks Remus to repeat 1 or 2 details, because careful men trust a pattern more after the second hearing. Then he sits with the answer until it settles into fact. You sit with yours on the hillside. Your shadow has shifted across the grass. Ants move around a crack in the stone by your foot. A cloud passes over the sun, and the whole slope cools for a few quiet breaths. You think of Rhea Silvia. You think of a young woman under watch. You think of hands wrapping wool around newborn bodies. You think of fear dressed as law. You think of a basket woven tight enough to hold hope against a rough river. You do not know what your face shows. Faustulus does not ask. He has never been a man to poke at another's silence. He simply stays near, broad and worn and real as the hillside. Beside him the world remains made of grass, leather, dust, and chores waiting their turn. That helps. Royal blood is difficult. Divine blood is even more difficult. A loose gate hinge, by contrast, announces its needs with admirable honesty. At last you ask what comes next. Faustulus answers in the only honest way. He says first you go home. Acca Laurentia will have stew on the fire. She may also have packed 3 loaves and dried figs in case destiny turns into travel by evening. You can see that too clearly to doubt it. Then he says you find Remus. If Numitor has reached the same answer, you will not be the last man in Latium to hear of it. News moves quickly downhill, especially when it can wear both a crown and a scandal. The sun slips free of the cloud. Light returns to the token cloth in his hand. For one moment you see it plainly. The river bank, the roots of the tree, the damp wicker. 2 children set aside by fear and returned by accident, by mercy, or by whatever name the world gives its refusals. Across the valley, your brother is hearing the same shape of truth from an old king. You hear it from an old shepherd. You are both found at once. Not by the wolf this time, not by the river, by words, by memory, by men who have carried the pieces until the pieces can finally be joined. The sheep bells go on in their small, steady rhythm. The Tiber flashes below as it always does. The hills smell of warm thyme and sun on stone. You rise slowly from the grass. The strap still hangs from your fingers. The gate still needs mending. The day, with all its ordinary things, refuses to stop out of respect for your ancestry. There is something comforting in that. Faustulus stands too. He picks up the cheese. He grunts at the sheep. He starts toward home with his heavy silence, which is lighter now by one long-kept secret. You follow him down the path. Below, the valley lies between you and your brother like a fold in a blanket. On one side, you carry a shepherd's dust and a prince's blood. On the other, Remus likely carries the same, with extra confidence, for no reason at all. The sheep bells sound thin in the late light when you call the young herdsman down from the slope. Wood smoke drifts from the cooking huts below. Wild thyme warms under your sandals. The Tiber shines far off in the valley like a strip of beaten silver. You stand on a flat stone near the fold gate. Your hand rests on rough olive wood. The staff feels plain and steady, which is useful, because the words in your mouth do not feel plain at all. The men gather in a loose half-circle. They come smelling of wool, milk, leather, and sun. One still carries a lamb over his shoulders, because the lamb, like many honest creatures, dislikes meetings. You know most of them by cough, step, and whistle. You know who ties his belt too tight. You know who always leaves one sandal strap half loose by midday. They know you in the same close way. They know how you count sheep without moving your lips. They know you can split kindling straight with one clean blow. They also know that if something goes wrong today, Remus got there first. He leans on a post with that same smug calm. There is dust on his knees. There is a scratch on his forearm. He looks exactly like a man who has already been in trouble and come back with opinions. You let the small sound settle first. A sheep snorts. Someone clears his throat. Beyond the huts, a pot lid clinks against clay in the evening wind. Then you tell them the truth. You tell them that the old king in Alba Longa is your grandfather. You tell them the throne was stolen before you were old enough to object, which feels rude of history. You tell them that your brother and you were set aside like unwanted bundles. You tell them that the river did not keep you. You tell them that the hills did. No one laughs. No one speaks at once. They look at your face, then at Remus, then back at you, as if 2 matching noses are suddenly a strong legal document. You do not dress the story in fancy words. You say who was robbed. You say who still waits. You say who sits in Alba Longa because he feared 2 babies and made that fear everyone else's problem. A breeze lifts the edge of your tunic. The wool scratches lightly at your knee. You are aware of your own breathing in a simple, stubborn way. One of the older herdsmen squints up at you. He rubs his thumb along the rim of his cup. Then he says he always thought you both had the kind of trouble around you that usually belongs to people with grandfathers in palaces. That earns a low murmur. It helps. Another man asks whether Numitor lives. His voice is careful. He asks it the way a man asks after weather that might still turn. You say he sits in a bare room and makes a stone floor look like a throne room just by sitting on it. You did not think such a thing was possible until you saw it. That brings them closer. Men trust details more than grand claims. A king on a stone floor is easier to picture than justice, and much easier to follow. You tell them what Faustulus told you at last. The words still feel warm from his mouth. They still carry the weight of his long silence. At the edge of the group, Faustulus himself stands with his shoulders bent under that old invisible load. He has arrived, of course, at exactly the wrong moment. He carries a wedge of goat cheese and a troubled look. His silences remain longer and heavier than any man's silences have a right to be. Tonight they seem a little less secret, which makes them only slightly smaller. You do not ask him to speak. You spare him that. He has carried 20 years of truth uphill and downhill. He has earned the right to stand there and breathe. So you speak for him. You tell them about the basket. You tell them about the flood-edge reeds. You tell them about the odd kindness of the world that left 2 hungry infants where a shepherd could find them. You leave the she-wolf in the story because it belongs there. You mention it plainly, as one mentions hail or figs. It remains the ancient world's most unorthodox fostering contract, with 0 stars for hygiene and 5 stars for outcomes. A few men grin at that. One shakes his head. Another says he is glad his own mother preferred less adventurous feeding methods. The laugh goes around softly. It does good work. You see fear in some faces. You see pride in others. Mostly you see the careful stillness men wear when a common day shifts under their feet. So you bring it back to calming things. You say the sheep still need watering. You say sandals still wear through at the heel. You say a stolen throne remains stolen whether men discuss it before supper or after. That lands where you want it to. A simple wrong often looks most clear beside simple chores. You tell them you are not asking for noise. You are asking for steadiness. You are asking for the sort of loyalty already practiced on hillsides in rain and heat. The youngest among them lifts his chin. He asks what happens if the city closes its gates. He asks it with the boldness of a man who has never had to repair a gate hinge. You say gates are made by hands. You say hands can be known. You say not every man inside Alba Longa has forgotten who Numitor is. That turns their eyes toward the city. Even from here, it is only a dim rise beyond darkening fields. Yet it seems to listen. You do not promise easy work. You promise useful work. The difference matters. A man with a scarred knuckle asks what you need first. His other hand strokes the neck of a dog that has drifted beside him. The dog yawns, which gives the whole affair a healthy lack of drama. You say first you need mouths closed, then you need feet ready, then you need every man to remember which paths lead into Alba Longa without raising dust. They nod because this is the language they know. Paths, dust, feet, closed mouths. These are stronger than speeches. Remus pushes off the post at last. He says he already told 3 men in the lower pasture to be ready by moonrise. He says it with that look that suggests he had the situation entirely under control before you even began. You stare at him for a beat. He shrugs. Whatever goes wrong today, Remus got there first. It is almost comforting. The sun lowers behind the ridge. The light turns the wool backs in the pen soft and gray. A child from the huts is called inside for supper, and the voice carries sweetly in the cooling air. You step down from the stone. Men do not crowd you. They simply stay near. One by one, they give you their answer in the old practical ways. A hand on your arm, a nod, a plain promise to meet after dark. No oath needs dressing up here. These men have already shared bad weather and thin winters. They know what a kept word feels like. The first messenger comes while the last light still clings to the grass stems. He is a narrow young man from the lower farms. He smells of dust and fennel seed. His mule looks offended by politics and would clearly rather discuss hay. You take him behind the store hut where the shadows lie cool. The wall there holds the day's heat. A wasp crawls lazily along the cracked clay lip of a water jar. He brings a small token wrapped in wool. It is only a ring cord and a strip of dyed cloth. Yet you know it at once from the room where Numitor waits. You rub the cloth between your fingers. It is worn thin at one edge. Someone has folded it many times, which feels like hope being handled carefully. The message is simple. 2 men at the grain gate remain loyal. A potter near the north wall can hide 5 more if needed. The watch changes after moonrise, and one guard likes sleep more than duty. That last part seems very human of him. You almost thank him in your heart for being tired. You send back your own answer with equal plainness. Keep the small door by the dye sheds unbarred if possible. Spread word only to those who can hold it without swelling. You do not write, because wax tablets travel with an unfortunate air of evidence. You trust memory and the old practice of repeating things 3 times. The messenger nods through the lines until he has them set. Then he takes a fig from his pouch and offers half to you. Planning goes down better with fruit. Before he leaves, you tell him to eat at least once before moonrise. Men make poor choices on empty stomachs. History often sounds grander than it tastes. He grins and slips away among the olive trunks. His mule follows with tragic dignity. Dust lifts in a pale ribbon and then settles back. More messengers come as the evening deepens. They arrive alone or in pairs. They come by goat track, by stream bank, by the narrow cut behind the shrine stones. One is a girl from a vineyard household. She carries onions in a net to make herself look busy. The smell announces her before her whisper does. Another is an old man with a limp and a basket of nettles. He pauses to complain about his knee for so long that no one would guess he is carrying half a city's worth of careful news. From them you build a map in your head. A cousin of a porter near the east wall, a servant in the household stores, a lamp left in the high window if the inner yard lies clear. The facts are small. They are wonderfully small. A city does not open from one mighty push. It opens from a sleepy guard, a trusted cousin, a hinge that has not been checked, and men inside who are tired of pretending. You think of Amulius then. He spent 20 years trying to delete the backup files of the royal line. He forgot that nature saves automatically to the cloud, which in Latium appears to be a shepherd hut. The thought makes your mouth twitch. It also steadies you. Faustulus stands nearby while the messages come and go. He says little. He shifts his weight from one foot to the other and watches the path. When the third messenger leaves, he hands you the wedge of goat cheese without a word. This, apparently, is how he supports a royal restoration. You bite into it. It is dry at the edge and sharp in the middle. It tastes of salt, goat, and fields baked under noon light. He finally says that the old king still has friends among the storekeepers. He says storekeepers remember who paid fare and who pinched grain. You ask how he knows. He gives you a look. The look says he has been carrying secrets longer than your beard has been trying. So you nod and accept the wisdom. Kingdoms, like flocks, often turn on who controls the food bins. By full dusk, you have enough threads to trust the pattern. Not every thread is strong. There are never enough strong threads. Still, together they begin to hold. The sky darkens from blue to plum over the Alban Ridge. Bats lift in fast little turns above the fig trees. Smoke from the huts lies flat and sweet in the cooling air. Now the work becomes visible. You go to the shepherd's stores, where useful things live without pride. The door beam sticks as always. You shoulder it open and smell dry wood, lanolin, dust, and old rope. Inside, light from one oil lamp reaches only part way. The far corners remain full of shapes that might be baskets or sleeping gods. Usually, they are baskets. Men bend and lift in the hush of shared purpose. No one talks much. There is a pleasant honesty to choosing tools by touch. You take down clubs first. They stand in a row against the wall, plain lengths of oak and ash, polished by hands and weather. Some are weighted at one end by years of practical argument with wolves. Hunting spears come next. Their shafts are stacked under a hide sheet. The iron heads are wrapped in cloth to keep the points from biting careless fingers. You unwrap each one and check the bindings. Twine can loosen in damp weather. Resin can crack if a spear spent too many summers above the smoke beam. A sling hangs from a peg near the grain sieve. You know it from your own hand. The leather cup is dark with use. The cords smell faintly of oil and dust. Soon there are more. Boys fetch them from hooks and baskets. They pour smooth stones into shallow trays, and sort them by size, the way women sort beans, with quick, exact fingers. The sound of stones knocking together is small and steady. It is a homely sound. It could belong to a quiet afternoon by the threshing floor. That pleases you more than any shining weapon could. These are shepherd things. These are hill things. They fit the palms that will carry them. A man tests a club by swinging it once through empty air. The whoosh ends in a grunt of approval. Another man rubs sheep fat into a dry spear shaft so it will not splinter in the hand. You find old hide straps in a chest and cut them into loops. Men bind knives more firmly to their belts. One uses a broken harness buckle because it still holds, and that is what matters. Remus appears from the back room, carrying 2 spears and 3 slings like a market thief who believes quantity itself proves skill. There is straw in his hair. You do not ask why. He says he found a hidden jar of lead sling pellets under the barley sacks. He says this as if he personally invented preparedness. You remind him that you hid that jar last winter. He seems untroubled by this correction. Whatever goes wrong today, Remus got there first, and he may also claim credit for things you buried with your own hands. The older men choose quietly. They know their reach, they know their knees. They do not select for pride. One broad man takes only a staff with an iron cap. He says he trusts wood more than metal, because wood has fed beside him all his life. No one argues. Near the door, a boy too young for the march watches with bright fixed eyes. You put him in charge of water skins instead. He swells with duty at once. You check the skins one by one. Some need fresh thongs. One smells faintly of sour wine from a past life and will improve no one's courage. There are woven bags for extra stones. There are small hatchets for rope and brush. There are coils of line that might serve to tie a gate or drag one open. You make neat piles in the yard by the lamp glow. Clubs together, spears together, slings and stones together. Order has a calming face. The women from nearby huts begin to notice what the yard has become. They do not fuss at first. They simply arrive with practical eyes. One brings strips of linen for wrapped hands. Another brings onions and salt, because any sensible outing may turn long. A third points out that 2 men have chosen sandals with worn soles and makes them change. You have seen storms gather with less quiet speed. Acca Laurentia comes out last from the kitchen hut. Steam follows her like loyal weather. She carries a big spoon in one hand and authority in both. She takes one look at the piles of weapons and sniffs. Then she asks who intends to march without eating. No one answers. This is wise. She sets bowls into waiting hands before anyone can claim he is too busy. The stew is thick, with barley, lentils, onion, and bits of goat. There is bay leaf in it, and the smell alone makes men kinder. You eat standing by the doorway, because she puts a bowl in your hand, and there is no known power in Latium that can stop that motion. Kings, lost princes, and favored sons all surrender to her ladle. The bread is coarse and warm in the middle. The crust leaves flour on your fingers. You wipe those fingers on your tunic, because history rarely stops for a clean cloth. Acca sees this, and clicks her tongue anyway. She says if you mean to reclaim a throne, you might at least go looking tidy from the waist up. Her round face stays calm. Her eyes stay sharp. She has the settled look of a woman who has packed provisions for every possible family event, including revelation of royal birth. She asks how many men will go. You tell her. She mutters the number once, then begins turning it into loaves, dried figs, and travel cheese inside her head. A younger man says very politely that you are in fact preparing to overthrow a king and may not need extra onions. Acca presses 2 onions into his hands as if correcting a child. She says kings may be overthrown on principle, but men still get hungry halfway there. This appears impossible to answer. Soon she has everyone moving in useful circles. One woman folds flat loaves in cloth. Another ties up garlic heads. Someone ladles stew into lidded pots, packed with hot stones to keep the heat. Acca even packs for Remus, with the air of a woman protecting the world from his habits. She gives him twice as much bread and tells him not to charge anywhere on an empty stomach. He says he never charges. Several men make quiet noises into their bowls. Faustulus receives a chunk of cheese, a heel of bread, and a look that says she knows exactly how much he has not said. He accepts all 3 with the solemnity of a man taking legal judgment. You catch her setting aside a small pouch of dried apples for you. She pretends not to notice that you notice. This is love in its usual local form. She also slips a pinch of thyme into one bundle for the road. She says food tastes better when it remembers the hills it came from. You think that may be true of people as well. The yard fills with the low sounds of readiness. Clay lids click, leather thongs pull tight. Men test the weight of bags that now carry more bread than glory. It calms you more than any shout could. A just cause with provisions feels far more real than a just cause without supper. You sit for a moment on the low wall and finish your bowl. The clay is still warm from the day. The stew leaves a line of heat in your chest that travels slower than fear and stays longer. Above you, the first clear stars show between roof smoke. The hills seem to lean close and listen. Somewhere a donkey brays with poor timing and strong conviction. Remus sits beside you for 3 breaths, which is almost a ceremony. He tears his bread exactly in half and hands you the larger piece, then claims it was the smaller one. You let him have that victory. He clearly needs some harmless ones. He says the men are ready. He says the lower path by the thorn copse is dry. He says he has already checked the stepping stones at the stream. You ask when he did that. He says earlier. Of course he did. The answer settles over both of you like familiar wool. Whatever goes wrong today, Remus got there first, probably with wet ankles and a satisfied expression. By the time the moon edges above the ridge, the whole place has gone quietly from farm to muster, not by magic, by hands. You see a man tying his belt 1 notch looser after eating. You see another wrap his good cloak in oilskin and leave the patched one on his shoulders. You see boys carrying water skins from the spring with solemn care. Dogs thread between legs and sniff every bundle. A baby wakes in one hut and is hushed back to sleep. Someone remembers flint and tinder at the last moment and runs to fetch them. These details keep the evening human. You are grateful for everyone. At last there is little left to fix. The sheep are penned, the fires are banked, the tools that stay behind are hung in their places, because even urgent nights should not become messy mornings. You walk once around the yard. You touch shoulders. You check straps. You meet eyes and find the same answer waiting in each. The moonlight silvers the grass on the slope above the huts. Each blade shines at its edge and darkens at its root. The world looks both strange and very familiar, which suits the night. You set out without trumpet, drum, or any such city habits. You prefer the sound of sandals on packed earth. It feels honest. The line of men bends down the hillside in patient curves. Spears rise over shoulders like a second thin grove. Here and there a sling bag taps softly against a thigh. The air turns cooler as you leave the last hut behind. Wild thyme releases under your steps. The smell mixes with wool cloaks, leather smoke, and the faint onion breath of a well-fed revolution. That last detail would not please poets. It pleases you. You keep the pace steady from the start. No one rushes. No one lags for long. The path takes the rhythm of breathing and remains there. This is not the hurry of fear. It is the calm movement of men who know where they are going and why and what bread waits in their bags. The hills open around you in pale folds. Cypresses stand black against the sky. Far below, the Tiber catches the moon and lies bright as a blade that has forgotten all quarrels. Crickets work the fields with tireless small music. An owl speaks once from an oak. Sheep bells drift from some far slope where other men sleep through history, and will hear of it later over porridge. You glance back now and then. The line holds. You see Faustulus in the middle ranks. He carries his staff and 1 spear. In the moonlight his shoulders still look burdened, yet not so bent as before. Perhaps secrets weigh most when they have nowhere to go. Tonight his have begun walking beside him. Akka does not march with you, because someone wise must remain where the fires are. Yet her presence travels anyway in every loaf, every pouch, every man chewing quietly as he walks. One fellow unwraps bread too soon and earns soft laughter. Another asks for a fig and is told to wait until the next rise. Campaign discipline in Latium has a very domestic face. You pass the thorn copse Remus checked. The path is indeed dry. You decide not to praise him yet, because he would become unbearable for at least half a mile. The stepping stones gleam pale under a skin of moving water. Men cross in 2s and 3s. Sandals darken and then lighten again as they climb the bank. Remus reaches the far side first and leans on his spear as if he has been patiently waiting there all evening. Naturally. Beyond the stream the ground turns softer, with old leaf mold under the trees. The smell changes from open grass to damp bark and cool earth. Somewhere nearby, mint grows wild by the water. A messenger appears from the shadows where the path joins the lower road. He gives the sign with his hand. You answer with yours. The exchange is so quiet, it could be two men discussing weather. He says the lamp shows in the high window. He says the grain gate men remain true. He says the city has settled into the heavy sleep of people who expect tomorrow to resemble today. That feels like an advantage granted by the gods to the patient. You thank him and send him ahead to the next turn. He slips away between the trunks. The moon catches the back of his neck once and then loses him. The road toward Alba Longa broadens. Cart ruts show white in the light. Dry grasses brush your calves at the edges. Ahead, the city sits along the rise, pale walls and darker roofs stacked against the sky. It does not glitter. It simply waits, which somehow makes it seem closer. You feel many things as you look at it. Anger is there, but quiet. Wonder is there too. Beneath both lies a plain sense of fit, as if a story long bent wrong is finally finding its true line. You do not speak that aloud. Some thoughts are best carried inside the ribs for a while. Instead, you tell the men to drink a little and not too much. You tell them to keep near and keep calm. You tell them that justice does not improve by tripping over roots. That earns the soft breath of half laughter. Good. Laughter keeps hands from shaking. Numitor waits within those walls. You picture him on stone, with his back straight and his hands at rest. You picture a room made larger by his patience. You think of the first time you saw him. You think of recognition moving across a face already trained to endure. It felt less like discovery than return. Now you move toward him under a moon that shines on kings, shepherds, nettles, and muddy sandals with complete fairness. It is a comforting sort of light. The men around you walk with the quiet confidence of a just cause that has eaten well and checked its straps twice. There is deep strength in that. A city stolen by one fearful old man begins at last to come back by the work of sons, friends, cousins, storekeepers, and shepherds who know their paths in the dark. You keep walking. The moon climbs higher, Alba Longa grows larger. The hills behind you fade into one soft, dark back of land, still smelling faintly of thyme and smoke. No one needs to hurry. The night is with you. The road is clear. Your grandfather's house and your own strange birthright wait ahead in the calm silver light. The lower gate of Alba Longa waits in the gray light like a mouth still deciding whether to yawn. You come down the last slope with dew on your sandals and wild thyme brushing your calves. The silver line of the Khyber lies far below in the valley. Sheep bells clank somewhere behind you on the Alban hills. Wood smoke hangs in the air, with that dry, sweet smell of olive twigs and damp ash. Your cloak feels cool across your shoulders. The wool scratches your neck in the same familiar place as always. The city does not look royal from this angle. It looks sleepy and practical and slightly in need of sweeping. A dog noses through yesterday's wilted greens beside the road. You keep your hand on the rough shaft of your staff as you walk. A splinter near the top still catches your thumb, if you forget. Around you, your small band moves in that careful dawn hush that country people know well. Sandals scuff on packed earth. Someone's water skin taps softly against a hip at each step. Acca Laurentia has packed food for this venture, as if you are going to a picnic. She has wrapped bread in cloth. She has tied up olives in a little skin pouch. She has also tucked in a pot of stew, so thick it barely agrees to slosh. She believes every problem bends sooner under broth than under strategy. It is hard to prove her wrong. Bread has a way of making men feel more reasonable. Faustulus comes beside you at the worst possible moment, which is his oldest habit. He carries a wedge of goat cheese and a troubled look. His silence lands between you like another person joining the march. He only shifts the cheese from one hand to the other. The weight of his secret seems to sit plainly across his shoulders now. Ahead, the lower gate is already opened by a man's width. A guard must have risen before dawn. Somewhere inside, a woman is grinding grain, and the stone turns with a sleepy circular scrape. The gate timbers smell of resin and old rain. Iron studs catch the first light in dull brown spots. You pass your fingers near one split plank and feel rough sap hardened like amber tears. No trumpet sounds. No one cries alarm. A pair of geese complain in the yard nearby with far more public spirit than the household guard. You step under the shadow of the gatehouse and into Alba Longa. The air changes at once. It holds more smoke and more baking and less open grass. The street slopes gently upward between walls of pale mud brick and stone. Water from some early washing runs along the gutter in a thin, dark line. A dropped fig skin sticks to the ground near your sandal. A cart stands outside a potter's yard with one wheel slightly sunk in the ruts. A stack of fresh bowls cools on a board. Their rims are still chalky with fine dust. You hear shutters being lifted. You hear a child laugh and then be hushed. You hear a rooster announce himself with the confidence of a tiny official. The city wakes in layers. First come smells, then come sounds, then come faces peering from doorways and deciding whether this morning is ordinary after all. You keep to the side where the wall throws a narrow strip of shade. Your companions do the same without speaking. It feels less like entering a city than arriving early for market. A baker's oven breathes warm air over the lane. You catch the smell of barley bread and sesame. Your stomach notices at once, because your stomach remains loyal to its own calendar. Remus ought to be here with some daring plan and an untidy grin. Instead, you move toward the heart of the city without him. That absence sits oddly beside you, like a missing sheep bell in a flock. Then again, whatever goes wrong today, Remus usually gets there first. If trouble were a doorway, he would already be leaning in it. He would probably say he is only checking the hinges. You turn into a lower market square still strewn with yesterday's leaves and wilted herbs. A fish seller's table has been scrubbed but not very successfully. The smell remains in honest disagreement with the water. A woman carrying onions pauses and steps back into her doorway. An old man with a broom simply keeps sweeping. He watches you with the bored dignity of someone who has seen too many new dawns to be impressed by one more. Nothing in the city quite knows whether to resist you. That uncertainty works in your favor. It drifts ahead of you like mist. You cross past a shrine with a small blackened bowl still holding yesterday's ash. Someone has left a wilted garland there. The petals have gone papery at the edges. One of your companions touches the shrine in passing and then his chest. Another adjusts the strap of his sandal. Small habits stay steady even when a kingdom begins to tilt. Far above, the upper houses catch the first true gold of the sun. Roof tiles glow softly for a breath. Swallows flick under the eaves like quick dark thoughts. You think of the hills beyond the walls. You think of the sheep that still need watering. The morning keeps trying to be ordinary, which makes the strange parts seem almost polite. Numitor has promised his own move from within the palace at first light. That knowledge moves beside you like a second dawn. Somewhere above, old hands are lifting old bars from old doors. You picture him even without meaning to. You see him sitting straight on a plain bench. You see how he can make a stone floor feel like a hall of kings, simply by resting his feet on it. In the palace, servants will be moving before the grander people wake fully. Water jars will be carried. Braziers will be stirred. Doors that creak every morning will creak for history as well, though they will not know the difference. Perhaps a sleepy porter rubs his eyes and finds the wrong men already inside. Perhaps a maid carrying folded linen steps aside with perfect calm. Perhaps one old steward bows to Numitor because his body remembers before his fear does. That is the thing about a reign built on worry. It spends years trying to bolt every shutter. Then dawn comes through the cracks anyway. Amulius had essentially tried to delete the backup files of the royal succession. He forgot that nature saves automatically to the cloud. The cloud, in this case, smells strongly of sheep and hillside smoke. You pass another corner and find a pair of guards by a side lane. Their spears are upright but not eager. Their eyes move from your faces to your staffs and back again. One guard has a strip of porridge still drying on his beard. The other wears one sandal thong tied with plain string. Neither man looks like destiny in polished form. You stop a short space away and let the silence do its work. The city hums around you with breakfast noises. Somewhere close, a spoon strikes the rim of a bowl. The older guard shifts first. He lowers his spear point until it rests on the stones. The younger one follows after a breath, because loyalty often works like that. You see at once how thin Amulius has spread himself. His guards stand there like men hired to watch a warehouse through drizzle. Loyalty has only ever run as deep as his pay. and perhaps not even that deep on a cold morning. One of them glances uphill toward the palace. He hears something there that you cannot quite hear yet. It may be raised voices. It may only be doors opening quickly. Then he steps aside and wipes his hand on his tunic. It is not a grand gesture. It is simply a man deciding he would rather eat supper than explain himself to a new king. You pass them without haste. Their bronze fittings click softly as they shift away from the wall. The sound is small, but it changes the day. More guards appear in twos and threes as you climb. More of them choose stillness over trouble. Some straighten their belts as if neatness might count as allegiance. One man sets down a shield and pretends he only meant to rest it there briefly. Another begins giving advice to nobody in particular. A third looks offended that events did not consult his morning plans. The whole thing starts to unravel with surprising speed. It reminds you of a market stall caught by a strong hillside wind. First one rope loosens, then the mat lifts, then figs roll everywhere. You had expected more running and blocked doors and difficult corners. Instead, the city keeps opening before you in a series of practical little surrenders. A woman with flour on both hands pulls her child gently inside. A mule keeps chewing at a basket of greens with complete indifference. A priest pauses to adjust his belt and then continues toward a shrine because the gods still expect breakfast offerings. At the next square, someone has dropped a bunch of leeks. They lie across the stones like green cords. A hen pecks around them with scholarly focus. You are almost disappointed by how ordinary it feels. Not deeply disappointed, only enough to notice that destiny has arrived wearing dusty sandals and no sense of theater. Faustulus comes up beside you again, still carrying that wedge of goat cheese. It seems to have become part of his authority. If he ever rules anything, it will be a small kingdom of weather, silence, and dairy. He clears his throat as if to speak, then he does not. His silences remain longer and heavier than any man's silences have a right to be. You glance at him and see relief beginning under the worry. He has held this secret for 20 years. Even now, while the palace changes hands, he looks like a man wondering whether everyone has eaten. The street broadens near the upper precinct. Here the houses give way to larger walls and courtyards. Cypress trees stand still in the clear morning, dark and narrow against the brightening sky. A servant hurries across one courtyard with folded blankets over both arms. He sees your group and nearly drops them. Then he decides blankets are still blankets and continues where he was going. Somewhere ahead, voices rise together and then settle. Sandals slap on paving stones. A bolt is drawn back with a long wooden knock. Numitor is moving at the same moment from within the palace. You feel the two currents meet. Your band comes from the lower gate like water from the hills, and his old claim pushes outward from the center. It is less like a battle than a house finally admitting which beams are rotten. A room shifts, dust falls, the family begins carrying better furniture into the sunlight. At the outer court, a cluster of palace guards holds position by habit more than desire. Their helmets are good bronze, their faces are tired clay. One man has tied a lucky charm into his sword belt with red wool. Another has a cracked thumbnail dark with lamp soot. A third is plainly thinking about the account books, because somebody always is. They see men emerging from the inner side as well. They see servants standing aside for Numitor's household. They see the shape of the day, with the sad accuracy of men who know payroll better than poetry. Then the first shield lowers, then another. Then the whole neat line becomes a row of men politely deciding not to be available. The relief on some faces is almost comic. It turns out many people prefer a rightful old king to a nervous usurper before breakfast. This is the sort of political wisdom nobody writes in bronze, though it explains half the world. No one rushes you. No one bars the court. A junior officer removes his helmet and tucks it under his arm with the air of a man ending a long shift. You walk through the space they leave. Sand crunches under your sandals. The morning sun reaches over the east wall and lays bright bands across the paving stones. The court smells of damp stone, olive oil, and trampled rosemary from some fallen garland. A fountain trickles in the middle basin. Two sparrows keep arguing on its rim, as if kings were a minor local issue. You hear somewhere inside the soft clatter of a stool overturned. You hear a woman telling someone to move aside. You hear, much nearer, Akka muttering that all this would go better if people stopped and ate something hot. She presses a heel of bread into your hand as you cross the court. The bread is still slightly warm from its cloth wrapping. Even at a turning of dynasties, your foster mother remains committed to steady blood sugar. You take a bite because refusing her feels more dangerous than entering a palace. The crust flakes against your lips. A few sesame seeds stick to your thumb. By now, Amulius's reign is collapsing with such speed that it almost seems embarrassed. 20 years of fear and watching and plotting fold away in one clear morning. It is the old trick of a bad roof, which looks solid until the rain remembers every weak place. A servant opens a side door for you without being asked. Another gestures toward the inner hall with a face of pure practical surrender. They are not choosing poetry today. They are choosing whichever master seems least likely to shout through dinner. Inside, the cool air smells of lime wash, rush mats, and last night's lamp smoke. Your eyes adjust slowly after the court. The stone underfoot feels smooth in long-worn patches. The corridor walls hold painted patterns faded by years of hands and dust. A low bench stands against one side with one leg packed steady by a folded bit of leather. Even palaces mend things the same way shepherd huts do. You pass a room where two scribes have simply stopped writing. One still holds his stylus in the air. The wax tablet on his knee is marked with half a line and a thumbprint. A storage door stands open. You glimpse baskets of dried beans, sealed jars, folded wool, and one broom fallen sideways. It comforts you strangely that kingdoms still require brooms. The nearer you come to the central hall, the quieter everything grows. It is not the silence of danger. It is the silence of people waiting to see which direction they should bow. You feel your heart beat hard anyway. Your mouth tastes of bread and ash. Your palm is damp where it rests around your staff. Then you step through a broad doorway and stop, because there is Remus. Of course there is Remus. He is already free. He leans against a column as if he has merely chosen the best spot for shade. One ankle rests over the other with criminal ease. His tunic is dusty at one shoulder. There is a faint smear on one forearm where some door or wall has objected to him. His hair looks exactly as if several officials have failed to improve it. He lifts his head when he sees you. His face arranges itself into that smug calm which says without a single spoken word that he had everything under control. It is a remarkable expression because even now it is almost convincing. You had crossed the city expecting to find him locked away and furious. Instead, you find him comfortable enough to judge the architecture. Whatever goes wrong today, Remus has indeed reached it first. He pushes off the column and stretches his shoulders as though the whole morning has been mildly inconvenient. The column for its part seems relieved to be done supporting such confidence. A broken cord hangs from one wrist where someone has tied him earlier. He twirls it once and lets it drop. Even his scraps behave as if they belong in a story later told beside a fire. You go to him at once. Your relief arrives so fast it nearly makes you lightheaded. You grip his forearm and he grips yours, and for a breath the room narrows to that simple touch. He smells of dust, sweat, and the stale straw of a holding room. Under it all, he smells like the hills. City walls have not improved him. He tells you, in the tone of a man reporting excellent weather, that the latch was poor and the guard was bored. He says the cell had a very small window and terrible hospitality. He seems personally offended by the lack of breakfast. You look past him and see the open side chamber. A stool lies on its side near the wall. A clay cup has rolled into a corner and somehow survived, which feels in character for this morning. Remus shrugs as if a prince's imprisonment is only a long wait between meals. The ancient world's most unorthodox fostering contract prepared you both for many things. 0 stars for hygiene, 5 stars for outcomes. You do not mention the she-wolf aloud here. Even so, the thought flickers warmly through you. Nature has strange methods, but it does occasionally produce excellent brothers. Faustulus reaches the hall just then and stops short at the sight of Remus free. His jaw works once. Then he presses the goat cheese into Remus's hands as if this explains all important feelings. Remus accepts it with great seriousness. He inspects the rind like a magistrate reviewing tribute. Then he breaks off a piece and eats before speaking another word. Akka follows close behind with her bundle of provisions and a face full of relief. She touches Remus from shoulder to cheek to elbow, as if counting him by hand. Then she asks whether anyone here has a pot, because the stew should not wait forever. It is possible that dynasties rise and fall mainly to give Akka new places to reheat food. She already eyes a palace hearth with domestic intent. If a tyrant's reign ends before dawn, she still wants everyone served by noon. Beyond the hall, more people begin to gather. Palace servants stand near the walls with careful, neutral faces. Older men of Alba Longa come in with robes hastily belted and sandals not quite matched. Their eyes move from you to Remus and back again. Some stare openly at your likeness. It is always disconcerting to become a family resemblance before strangers. Then Numitor enters from the inner side, and the whole room settles around him. He does not hurry. He does not need to. He wears plain wool, though of better weave than most. His white hair catches the sun from the high doorway. His back is straight enough to shame younger men without any effort at all. A stone bench stands along the wall, and he rests one hand on it for a moment. Somehow the hall changes shape around that gesture. You have seen him make a stone floor look like a throne room simply by sitting on it, and today he nearly does it standing. He looks first at you, then he looks at Remus with the same grave warmth. In that long, measured gaze, 20 stolen years seem to draw a slow breath. Around him, the last pieces of Amulius's order come loose. A captain removes his belt of office and lays it down on a nearby chest. A steward brings keys on a ring and places them into Numitor's hand without ceremony. No one speaks Amulius's name at first. It hangs in the room like smoke after a lamp is pinched out. The smell remains a little while, but the flame is already gone. When at last someone asks where the old usurper is, the answer comes in a murmur from the side. He is under guard in an inner chamber. He is not grand. He is simply finished. The end arrives so swiftly that it almost feels impolite to stare at it. You had imagined years of fear making a heavier thing of itself. Instead, it folds down like a traveling stool. Perhaps that is how many tyrants end. They spend decades arranging cushions under themselves. Then one ordinary morning removes the chair. You find to your own surprise that the lack of drama calms you. You do not need a roaring tale. You need your brother alive, your grandfather standing, and a room where people stop pretending. Sunlight lifts slowly higher across the hall floor. It catches grit and tiny wool fibers and the edge of a bronze bowl. History often arrives in such company, with dust visible in the beam. A servant finally rights the fallen stool with a neat practical motion. Someone else gathers the unbroken cup from the corner. Even in the middle of a restored kingdom, people tidy. Remus has finished half the goat cheese by now. He offers you some with a face of immense generosity. You take it because you are hungry, and because refusing him would create a speech. The cheese is sharp and salty. It crumbles against your tongue. For one quiet moment, the whole palace tastes like a shepherd's breakfast. Numitor watches the two of you eat with an expression too deep for easy naming. Relief lives there. Pride lives there. So does the mild astonishment of a man whose lost heirs have turned up carrying country dust and excellent appetites. He beckons you both nearer. Sandals scrape back over stone in a soft ring of movement. You stand before him with bread in one hand and your staff in the other. Remus still leans slightly, because upright dignity seems never to fit him for long. The contrast between you would be amusing if it were not so familiar. Numitor places a hand on each of your shoulders. His palms are dry and steady. In that touch, the hidden line of your life joins itself together at last. You think of the river. You think of reeds and mud and rough wool and smoke-dark rafters. You think of how Amulius tried to cut a family out of the world, and the world kept growing it back. Nature, as it turns out, is annoyingly thorough with backup copies. It saves them in baskets, in huts, in wolf dens, in shepherd hands. It stores them on hillsides with thyme in the grass and sheep bells in the wind. Behind you, Akka is already negotiating for a larger pot. A palace cook looks dazed but willing. Somewhere in the exchange, leeks become important. Faustulus stands a little apart with his emptied hands and his bowed head. Without the cheese, he looks lighter by several years. The secret has at last stepped out of him and into daylight. When he lifts his face again, His eyes shine in that stern, weathered way he would never call tears. You know better than to shame him by noticing too closely. So you only step near enough that your shoulder touches his for a moment. He gives the smallest grunt, which in him means almost anything worth saying. Then he straightens his belt. Even after helping topple a usurper, he looks ready to ask whether the lower pasture gate was latched. Around the hall, voices begin to return in practical tones. Lists are mentioned. Messengers are chosen. Someone asks for clean water. Someone else asks where the seal ring has gone. This is another comfort of the morning. Once fear thins, ordinary life rushes in to occupy the space. Kingdoms, like households, immediately need cups, keys, and someone sensible near the fire. You stand in the middle of it with your twin beside you and the city opening around your feet. Outside, Alba Longa is fully awake now. Market stalls will be lifted, loaves will be sold, children will race along the lanes and be called back. The tyrant's reign has ended with less thunder than a summer storm. It has gone with more dust, more footsteps, and more awkward standing aside. There is something almost funny in that. You can imagine future Romans telling the older story at dinner for centuries, always adding polish. They will prefer wolves and river reeds and prophecies. They may leave out the leaks on the paving and the tired guard with porridge on his beard, but you are here, and you know what this morning feels like in your own hands. It feels like rough bread. It feels like smooth stone. It feels like a brother's forearm and a grandfather's steady palm. The day ahead will ask much of you. The city will need names spoken and places sorted and old wrongs set down in new order. Yet for one soft breath, none of that hurries you. You stand in the brightening hall and let the new shape of things settle. Remus leans back against the column again as if he owns the sunlight there. To no one's surprise, he looks entirely unbothered. You can still see your grandfather in the great hall of Alba Longa. You see him take his place again, with no grand noise around him. You see the old seat beneath him, and the lamp glow on the worn wood, and his hands resting still at last. Then he simply looks at you and your brother for a long moment. That look settles over you more deeply than any shout ever could. You remember how the whole hall seems to breathe out with him. You remember the small sounds after that. Sandals on stone, a cough near the back, the soft clink of cups passing from hand to hand. You remember the city trying to celebrate without quite knowing how loud to be. Relief has its own quiet manners. Bread moves from bench to bench. Thin wine catches the lamplight. Someone laughs, then lowers it at once, as if joy should wear indoor shoes tonight. You remember Remus beside you, all scraped pride and easy grin, already acting as if he has always leaned against royal walls. Of course he reaches this kind of trouble first. Then the two of you sit together at last and speak of a city that does not yet stand. It lives only in your words for now. It lives in a hillside, and a light of stones, and the plain old wish to begin. Outside, beyond the doors, the Alban hills go dark and still. The wood smoke thins into the night. The wild thyme on the air turns cool. Far below, the Tiber keeps its silver line in the valley, like a thought you will return to in the morning. Now the warmth of the hall stays with you a little longer, like a cloak that has held the day's last heat. The lamps burn low, the crowd thins, the stone at your back feels steady, and the hills outside settle into such a deep quiet that even the distant sheep bells sound half asleep. At last, somewhere nearby, Faustulus stops carrying the whole secret alone, and even his heavy silence seems to sit down for the night beside his wedge of goat cheese. May your dreams be free of uncles who quietly rearrange the succession before you draw your first breath. May your dreams be free of twin brothers who charge into a city of armed guards and emerge leaning against a column, entirely unbothered, claiming they had it handled. May your dreams involve exactly the right amount of moonlit marching toward thrones that were yours all along. Thank you for listening. Keep your thoughts easy, and good night.